Tonight, we're uncovering the darkest secrets of Mew and the hidden origin of all Pokémon. This is a captivating topic, but I'll keep my narration calm to ensure you can still drift off to sleep. Thank you to those of you who've been joining us consistently. If you're falling asleep with us tonight, let me know in the comments how many nights in a row you've been here, and if this is your first night, just comment night 1. Now back to the video. Imagine, if you will, a world before the Pokédex, before the sprawling cities of Kanto or the high-tech laboratories of Kalos. Imagine a time when the boundary between myth and biology was non-existent. Deep within the impenetrable, humid jungles of Guyana, South America, a discovery was made that would forever shatter our understanding of life itself. It wasn't just a new species, it was the ancestor, the source code, the alpha and the omega of every creature we have ever trained, battled, or loved. We often think of Mew as a playful pink sprite, a rare prize to be found at the end of a long journey. But the truth buried in the journals of the Pokémon Mansion is far more unsettling. Mew is not merely a Pokémon, it is a biological miracle and a scientific nightmare rolled into one. It is a creature that contains the genetic blueprints for every living Pokémon in existence, a living library of DNA that stretches back to the very dawn of time. But how can one tiny creature hold the keys to an entire ecosystem? And why, for so many years, was its existence scrubbed from the official records, leaving only whispers and shadows in its wake? Tonight, we are going on an odyssey through the dense foliage of history and the cold, sterile halls of forbidden science. We will explore the ancient legends of the people who worship Mew as a deity, a guardian that appeared only at the first light of dawn. We will look into the tragic life of Morimoto, the mother of a legend, who vanished into the snows of the Andes, seeking a glimpse of this mythical being. We will confront the hubris of Mr. Fuji and the scientists who thought they could play God by extracting the lifeblood of a myth to create a weapon. The story of Mew is the story of Mewtwo. Yes, but it is also the story of us, of humanity's desperate need to categorize, control, and eventually replicate the divine. It is a tale of space constraints and digital ghosts, of a creature that was never supposed to exist in the code of our reality, yet forced its way into our world through sheer force of will. We will examine why Mew is the only creature capable of learning almost every move, the secret behind its invisibility, and the terrifying implication that every Pokémon is just a fragmented shadow of Mew's original perfection. As the world outside grows quiet and the lights dim, let your mind wander into the tall grass of the unknown. We are peeling back the layers of a mystery that has lasted for decades. From the Guyanese jungle to the burnt-out ruins of Cinnabar Island, the secrets are waiting. They are written in the double helix of a DNA strand and hidden in the static of an old radio broadcast. This is the definitive history of the ancestor. This is the lore of the origin. This is the truth about Mew. Think of the silence of the jungle at midnight. The air is heavy with the scent of damp earth and ancient moss. Somewhere in the canopy, a flicker of pink light dances between the trees. Gone before the eye can truly register it. This is where our journey begins. Not in a laboratory with bubbling vats, but in the heart of nature, where the first heartbeat of the Pokémon world began. We are looking for the phantom, the mirage, the creature that started it all. The stakes are higher than just completing a collection. To understand Mew is to understand the very fabric of the universe. If Mew is the ancestor, then every Pikachu, every Charizard, and every Magikarp carries a piece of its soul. But what happens when that soul is fractured? What happens when science tries to improve upon the perfect design of nature? The creation of Mewtwo wasn't just an accident. It was a violation of the natural order that sent ripples through time. Tonight, we will bridge the gap between the games we played as children and the dark, complex mythology that lies beneath the surface. We will speak of the radio dramas that never made it to the West, the lost journals of explorers who gave their lives for a glimpse of a long tale, and the technical miracles that allowed a single programmer to hide a god inside a cartridge. Close your eyes and listen closely. The jungle is calling, and the secrets of the origin are about to be revealed. In the original code of Pokémon Red and Green, there is a ghost, a silent, invisible presence that should not exist. A single line of data, a byte of memory, holding the key to a creature that was never meant to be found. That creature is Mew, and the story of how it got there is a puzzle that has puzzled players for decades. When the first Pokémon games were released in Japan, in February of 1996, they contained 151 Pokémon. That is the official count. But anyone who played the game and looked at the code could see something strange. The game's memory allocated space for exactly 191 Pokémon slots. The first 150 were filled with the familiar Kanto roster. Slot number 151 was left empty, but slot number 152, that was filled. That slot was Mew. Wait, that doesn't add up. 151 total, but Mew sits at slot 152. So what is in slot 151? Nothing. A zero, a placeholder, an empty space that the game engine treats as a missing creature. And yet the game still has the graphics, the stats, the move data for Mew. All of it was hidden away, buried in the cartridge's tiny memory chip. This is the technical anomaly. The 151st slot in the original red and green code, the slot that should have been the last, is a void. And that void, that empty space, became the foundation of the greatest playground myth in gaming history. The myth itself was simple. Somewhere, somehow you could catch Mew. Rumors spread like wildfire through schoolyards and playgrounds across Japan. You had to push a truck near the and you had to defeat the elite guard 100 times. You had to use strength on a specific rock. None of these methods worked, of course. Mew was not programmed to be caught. It was programmed to exist, but never to be encountered. So how did it get there in the first place? How did this ghost slip into the machine? The answer involves a developer named Shigeki Morimoto, a programmer on the original Pokémon team. According to the story, Morimoto inserted Mew into the game as a prank. He wanted to see if his co-workers would discover it during testing. He wanted to prove that his code could hide something right under their noses, and he succeeded. Mew bypassed Nintendo's quality control entirely. No one noticed the hidden data until after the game had shipped. The prank worked so well that it created a legend. But the truth is a little more complicated. Morimoto did not create Mew from scratch. The design was conceived by Satoshi Tajiri, the creator of Pokémon. Morimoto was responsible for the visual appearance and for actually programming the creature into the cartridge. And because of severe memory constraints, Mew had to be rendered as a single solid color. That is why, in the original games, Mew appears as a pink blob with no shading. The technical limitations forced a minimalist aesthetic, which somehow made the creature even more mysterious. The prank, however, was real. Morimoto hid Mew in a location that could only be accessed through a glitch. The game's code contained a small subroutine that would trigger a battle with Mew, but only if a specific set of conditions were met. Those conditions were never intended to be discovered by players. Yet they were, and the discovery of those glitches, the ability to make Mew appear by manipulating the game's memory, only fueled the rumors. The initial rumors that sparked the greatest playground myth in gaming history started with a single piece of information. There was a Pokémon that no one had ever seen, a Pokémon that existed only in whispers, a Pokémon that could be yours, if only you knew the secret. Children believed. They believed because the game's code felt so vast and unknowable. If there was a ghost in the machine, surely it could be summoned. And so the myth grew. From Japan to the rest of the world, the legend of Mew spread. It became the holy grail of Pokémon, a creature that was never meant to be found, yet was never truly forgotten. The empty slot at number 151 is a scar in the code, a crack in the facade of the game. And through that crack, a legend poured out. That legend would eventually lead to a very different discovery. A discovery that took place not in the digital realm, but in the real world, deep in the jungles of South America. It began with a date, July 5th, and it began in a place called Guyana. But that prank, that ghost in the machine, only tells us how Mew entered the game. It doesn't tell us where Mew came from. And to find that, we have to leave the sterile glow of a computer screen and travel to a place that doesn't exist on any map of the Pokémon world. Or at least, it shouldn't. I'm talking about South America, the real-world continent that somehow has a ghostly presence in the Pokémon franchise. You see, the official regions of the Pokémon world have always been based on real places. Kanto and Johto on Japan, Hoenn on Kyushu, Unova on New York, and so on. But South America, it's never been a major region. Yet there it is, buried in the lore mentioned in the most cryptic of sources. The journals found inside the Pokémon mansion on Cinnabar Island. Let's go there. Let's open those journals. The Pokémon mansion is a crumbling, abandoned research facility on the volcanic island of Cinnabar. In the original games, you can explore its dusty halls, read fragments of notes left behind by scientists who were trying to clone the most powerful Pokémon in the world. What would eventually become Mewtwo. But before Mewtwo, there was Mew, and one journal entry dated July 5th is where the whole story begins. The entry reads, July 5th, we discovered a new Pokémon deep in the jungle of Guyana. That's it. No fanfare, no description of the creature itself, just a cold, clinical note that would become the cornerstone of Pokémon mythology. But if you stop and think about that sentence, it raises more questions than it answers. Why Guyana? Why South America? And why does this single line feel like it was smuggled into the game? A secret from a world that exists just outside the edges of the screen. Let's sit with that for a moment. The Pokémon world we know is tidy. It has designated regions, each with their own climates and cultures. But South America is never a playable region. It's never even shown on a map. It's an anomaly, a geographical ghost. And yet here it is, the birthplace of the ancestor of all Pokémon. The implication is staggering. Mew wasn't discovered in Kanto or any of the familiar lands. It came from a place that, by the logic of the Pokémon world, shouldn't exist. Unless it does exist, but it's been deliberately hidden from us. So what happened on that expedition? We have to reconstruct it from atmosphere alone. Because the journals are frustratingly sparse, the scientists, likely part of the same team that would later work on the Mewtwo project, traveled deep into the jungle of Guyana. Guyana is real. It's a small country on the northeastern coast of South America, covered in dense rainforest, countless rivers, and a biodiversity that rivals anywhere on Earth. Imagine the heat, the humidity, the constant hum of insects. Imagine cutting through thick undergrowth, the canopy blocking out the sun, the ground soft and wet beneath your boots. And then they saw it, a small pink creature. It wasn't like anything they had catalogued before. Its eyes were large, almost childlike, but its movements were fluid, aware. It watched them with an intelligence that felt ancient. They didn't know what they had found. They only knew they had to bring it back. The journal doesn't say how long they stayed in Guyana, but a few days later, on July 10th, another entry appears. We named the newly discovered Pokémon Mew. The name is attributed to Mr. Fuji, the same man who would later become the caretaker of the orphanage in Lavender Town. He gave it a name that sounds like a whisper, like a sound you might make when you see something you can't quite believe. But think about the implications. The scientists brought Mew out of that jungle, back to Cinnabar Island. That journey alone would have been monumental. And once they had it in their laboratory, they began to study its DNA. That DNA, they discovered, contained the code for every Pokémon that had ever existed, and perhaps every Pokémon that ever would. Mew was the blueprint, the original, the source. And that discovery led to the biggest mistake in Pokémon history, the attempt to create Mewtwo. The journals in the Pokémon mansion tell us that the scientists used Mew's DNA to create the most powerful Pokémon in the world. But they didn't stop with cloning. They wanted to improve. They wanted to surpass nature. And Mewtwo, born from that hubris, eventually broke free, destroyed the laboratory, and became a legend in its own right. Yet no matter how powerful Mewtwo became, it could never be the original. That title belongs to a creature that was first seen on a July day, in a place that exists outside the boundaries of the official map. South America lingers in the lore like a half-remembered dream. It's a reminder that the Pokémon world is bigger than we know, that there are jungles and mountains and deserts we have never explored, and that the secrets hidden there may be darker and stranger than anything we've encountered in the games. So when you lie awake tonight, wondering about the truth of Mew, remember that it all began not in a laboratory, not in a game cartridge, but in the thick, humid air of Guyana, where the trees sway and the shadows move. And somewhere, perhaps still hidden in that jungle, there is a recording, a voice, a lost piece of the story that was never meant to be heard. That brings us to the next chapter, to a woman named Morimoto, and the final tape she left behind before she disappeared into the forest. The journals found on Cinnabar Island tell a clinical story, discovery dates, DNA samples, scientific notes written in sterile ink, but those records were deliberately sanitized. They omit the name of the person who actually found Mew, the one who first laid eyes on the creature deep in the Guyanese jungle. That person was not a researcher from the Pokémon Mansion. She was a Team Rocket operative. Her name was Morimoto, and she was Jessie's mother. To understand the dark truth behind Mew's origin, you have to travel back about 20 years before the events of the anime, before Team Rocket became a bumbling trio chasing Pikachu. Back then, Team Rocket was a serious criminal syndicate, and at its core was a woman with an unshakable obsession. Morimoto was not just any agent, she was one of the organization's most driven operatives. And she had a singular mission: find the phantom Pokémon. The creature whispered about in ancient legends, the one said to hold the genetic code of all life. She believed that capturing Mew would secure Team Rocket's future, giving them unimaginable power. But obsession is a slow poison. It starts as a spark, then a flame, then a fire that consumes everything else. For Morimoto, that fire burned away all thoughts of her young daughter, Jessie, who was left behind in the care of Team Rocket's trainers. The organization didn't care about raising children. They cared about results, and Morimoto was willing to give them results, no matter the cost. A search took her deep into the Andes Mountains, following fragmentary legends of a forest where ancient peoples had worshipped Mew. The records of her expedition survive in a series of audio logs, recorded on a portable device, and later recovered after her disappearance. Those logs are chilling to listen to, even now. In the early tapes, her voice is calm, controlled, analytical. She talks about tracing the migration patterns of indigenous Pokémon, about decoding petroglyphs carved into stone. She sounds confident, almost triumphant. But as days turn into weeks, a shift occurs. The isolation begins to wear on her. The thin mountain air, the constant driving wind, the eerie silence of places too high for most life to survive. She starts to speak of hearing something in the distance, a faint, musical cry, like a song carried on the wind. She calls it the Phantom's Call. In one log, her voice trembles as she says she's sure she's getting closer. She describes standing at the edge of a frozen lake, watching the sunrise paint the ice in shades of gold, and feeling a presence behind her. She turns, but there is nothing there. The final recording is the most haunting of all. Morimoto's voice is breathless, raw, almost manic. She says she has found it. She describes a small, cat-like shape in the mist, its eyes glowing with an ancient intelligence. She laughs, a sound that echoes in the dead air, and says that Team Rocket will be proud. And then, a sound that the recording captures only as a faint, rising hum, like a note sung by something not quite of this world. Then her voice cuts off. There is a scuffling noise, a scream that is not quite human, and then silence broken only by the wind. Morimoto was never seen again. Team Rocket sent search parties, but they found nothing. No body, no gear, no trace of the phantom Pokémon. The recording device was discovered weeks later, half buried in snow, its batteries drained, but the magnetic tape still intact. That tape was locked away in Team Rocket's archives, a secret that few ever heard. But the story of what happened to Morimoto became a cautionary tale whispered among the higher ranks. The phantom Pokémon was not meant to be captured, was something else entirely. Her daughter Jessie grew up not knowing the full truth. She was told that her mother had died in an accident, a cover story that allowed Team Rocket to erase the failure. But the obsession lived on in Jessie herself. Though she never understood why she always felt a pull toward the unknown, why she gravitated toward rare and powerful Pokémon, it was her mother's ghost pushing her from beyond the grave. Those audio logs remain the closest any human has ever come to witnessing Mew without a camera lens or a controlled lab environment. They are a testament to what happens when ambition meets the unknowable. Morimoto believed she was hunting a Pokémon. But what if the Pokémon was hunting her? What if Mew, in its silent, ancient way, decided that some secrets are too dangerous to be brought back into the world? That question lingers as we turn from the mountains to the laboratory, from the pursuit of the phantom to the extraction of its very essence. Because Morimoto's failure did not end the search, it only changed hands. The DNA she never managed to deliver eventually did find its way into Team Rocket's possession, stolen from the Pokémon Mansion by agents who did not know the cost. And that stolen code would be used to create something that Morimoto could never have imagined. Something that would one day challenge Mew itself. But before we get to that, we need to understand the nature of the blueprint, what it truly means to be the ancestor of all Pokémon, and why that knowledge is both a gift and a curse. The story of Mew's genetic legacy is one of the deepest and most unsettling chapters in Pokémon history, and it begins with a single strand of DNA that should never have been taken. Morimoto never returned from that jungle. The last thing Team Rocket ever heard from her was a whisper about a creature that could bend light itself. A ghost in the canopy, a flicker of pink that danced between the leaves like a half-remembered dream. She called it the Phantom Pokémon, and she had been willing to give everything, her life, her daughter, her soul, to bring it back to Giovanni. But the jungle kept it secret. For decades, the scientific world dismissed her reports as the ravings of a woman lost to heat and isolation. They assumed she had seen a hallucination, a trick of the tropical sun. They were wrong, because in July of that year, a team of researchers led by Mr. Fuji, the same man who would later watch over Lavender Town's grieving, pulled back the curtain on a truth so vast it would rewrite the very definition of life in the Pokémon world. They found Mew, not a ghost, not a myth, a living creature with a genetic code that should not exist in nature. And when they sequenced its DNA, they discovered something that shattered every assumption biology had ever made about the monsters that share this planet with us. Consider for a moment what it means to hold the blueprint for an entire kingdom. Every living thing carries a set of instructions, a long coiled chain of molecules that dictates how it grows, what it eats, how it fights, how it reproduces. That is the ordinary contract of life. But Mew's DNA is not ordinary. According to the journals preserved in the Pokémon Mansion on Cinnabar Island, Mew possesses the genetic code of every single Pokémon species. Everyone, from the smallest Magikarp thrashing in a stream to the most ancient Kyogre sleeping in the abyss. Pikachu, Charizard, Rayquaza, all of them. The same double helix that shapes a Caterpie's instincts also shapes Mew's. The same segments that give a Gengar its ghostly form lie dormant in Mew's cells. This is not a claim to take lightly. In our world, the idea of a universal ancestor, a single organism from which all life descends, is a theoretical cornerstone of evolutionary biology, but we have never found that ancestor. We only see its fingerprints, scattered across millions of species, like echoes of a song that no one can remember. In the Pokémon world, that ancestor is not a fossil. It is not a theory. It is alive. It is Mew. The biological implications are staggering. If Mew truly carries the genetic code of every species, then it holds the instructions for every possible form, every ability, every elemental power. Fire, water, grass, electric, psychic, dragon. They all exist within Mew's DNA waiting to be expressed. That means Mew is not just a Pokémon. It is a library, a living archive of everything the Pokémon Kingdom has ever been, and perhaps everything it could ever be. Scientists who studied Mew's cells under microscopic lenses reported seeing structures that seemed to fold in on themselves, as if the DNA itself was alive with potential, coiled so tightly that the strands of Magmar and Lapras and Alakazam were all woven into the same thread. And this explains why Mew is the only Pokémon capable of learning almost every technical machine and hidden machine ever created. Think about what a TM does. It is a disk of pure energy data, a program that rewrites a Pokémon's neural pathways, teaching it a move it did not naturally possess. Most Pokémon have hard limits. A Pikachu cannot learn Hyper Beam. A Snorlax cannot learn Fly. Their genetic architecture simply does not have the ports, the receptors, the allowances for those abilities. But Mew has no such restrictions, because Mew's body already contains the instructions for those moves. It already knows them, not as learned behaviors, but as genetic memories. A TM does not teach Mew something new. It simply unlocks a door that was already there. This makes Mew a biological paradox. It is the ancestor, and yet it is also the child of every species. It carries the past and the future in its cells. And that is why, when Team Rocket stole a sample of Mew's DNA and set out to create the ultimate weapon, they did not just clone a Pokémon, they forged a new being from the deepest threads of existence itself. Mewtwo was not created from nothing. It was sculpted from the blueprint of the universe. But here is the haunting part. The The same genetic code that gives Mew its infinite adaptability also makes it vulnerable, because if you can read that code, you can rewrite it, you can twist it, you can take the innocence of a creature that ancient peoples believed appeared once a year at sunrise to sing a holy song, and you can reshape it into a blade of fury. Mewtwo is the proof of that hubris, and yet Mew itself remains, a quiet, invisible ghost that still haunts the jungle, the laboratory, the collective memory of a world that refuses to understand what it has found. Somewhere, even now, a hidden song echoes through the forests of Guyana, a melody that the ancients used to call Mew home at dawn. They believed that as long as the song was sung, the ancestor would protect them. They did not know that their song had already been written into Mew's DNA, a genetic lullaby, older than any civilization. That song is still waiting to be heard, and in our next chapter, we will trace its notes back to the very first sunrise. We ended the last chapter with Mew's genetic code, a perfect library of every Pokémon that ever existed, every move, every shape, every possibility folded into one tiny pink creature. That biological truth is staggering, but it raises a question that science alone cannot answer. If Mew truly is the ancestor of all Pokémon, then how did our own species first encounter it? How did early humans, long before they dreamed of Pokeballs or laboratories, understand what they were looking at? The answer lies not in fossil records or genetic sequencing, but in the fragments of ritual and folklore that survive from the oldest civilizations of our world. Deep in the humid jungles of what we now call Guyana, and stretching into the lost valleys of ancient South America, there are stories that predate written history, stories whispered around fires carved into stone, painted on cave walls. They speak of a creature that was not just powerful, but holy, a being that appeared only once a year at the exact moment the sun crested the horizon, and that was never seen again until the next cycle of seasons. This was not a monster to be captured. This was not a force to be tamed. Mew, to those early peoples, was a deity, a guardian spirit that watched over the land and its inhabitants. The folklore of these ancient civilizations describes a protector that could turn invisible, that could change its shape, that could slip between worlds, and they worshipped it not with fear, but with reverence and song. The Song of Mew was not a simple melody. It was a ritualistic chant, passed down through generations, sung at dawn on the one day each year when the creature was said to reveal itself. Imagine the scene. A clearing in the jungle, the air thick with humidity and the sound of insects. The sky begins to lighten, the stars fading one by one. The elders, adorned in feathers and painted with the symbols of their clan, begin the slow, rhythmic chant. The younger ones join, their voices rising in harmony. They do not beg, they do not plead. They sing a song of gratitude, a song that thanks Mew for the rain that fell, for the harvest that grew, for the children born under its watch. And then, when the first ray of sunlight breaks through the canopy, they see it, a small pink shape hovering just above the treetops. It glows faintly, as if made of morning light itself. It stays only long enough for the song to reach its final note, and then it vanishes, not fleeing, but dissolving, as though it had never been solid at all. This was the ritualistic significance of the sunrise appearance. It was not a hunt, it was a sacred appointment. The appearance of Mew at dawn symbolized renewal, the promise that life would continue, that the world was still balanced. The Song of Mew was a thread connecting the human world to something older, something wiser, and for centuries this tradition held. But folklore alone does not satisfy the historian's hunger. We need evidence. And here is where the archaeological record becomes haunting. In the dense forests near the border of modern-day Guyana and Venezuela, researchers have uncovered stone carvings that predate the known indigenous cultures of the region by at least 2,000 years. These carvings, etched into basalt boulders, depict a small quadrupedal creature with large eyes and a long tail. It is surrounded by smaller figures, humans perhaps, or other Pokémon, and above it there is a circle with rays extending outward, a sun, a sunrise. The dating of these carvings places them long before the Pokeball era, long before any written records of Pokémon as we know them. They suggest that Mew's influence on human culture was not a recent phenomenon, not a legend born from a single sighting by a modern explorer. It was woven into the spiritual fabric of the earliest civilizations. The same DNA that links every Pokémon species may have also linked those ancient humans to something they could not explain, something they could only worship. And yet the Song of Mew did not survive intact into the modern age. It faded as civilizations fell, as jungles reclaimed the temples, as the yearly appearance grew rarer and rarer. By the time the first European explorers set foot in South America, the song was only a rumor, a ghost story told by the elders to children who no longer believed. But the memory of that deity lingered. It waited in the shadows of the rainforest, patient, invisible, until someone came looking for it. Someone who was willing to follow the echo of that ancient song all the way to its source. That someone was not a scientist, not a researcher from the Pokémon League. It was a woman driven by obsession, by ambition, by a desire to prove that the phantom was real. She vanished into the jungle, and when she emerged, she carried something that would change everything. But that story belongs to the next chapter, where we follow the footsteps of the Fuji expedition. The Song of Mew may have been forgotten by the world, but it was never truly lost. It was only waiting to be heard again. The ancient song that humanity once sang to Mew faded into silence long before the modern world drew its first breath. But the echoes of that melody never truly vanished. They lingered in the genes of every Pokémon, in the fossil records buried beneath layers of time, and in the desperate heart of a grieving father who would stop at nothing to break the boundaries of life and death itself. That father was Dr. Fuji. Before he became the architect of one of the greatest scientific sins in Pokémon history, he was just a man who lost his daughter. Her name was Amber, and she was taken by a sickness that no medicine could cure, no prayer could reverse. In the quiet hallways of the Pokémon house on Cinnabar Island, you can still feel the weight of that loss. The photographs on the walls, the empty rooms, the toys that no longer had anyone to play with. It was this wound, raw and unhealing, that transformed Fuji from a gentle researcher into a man willing to bargain with darkness. He began to study the very fabric of life. He learned of Mew, the phantom Pokémon that had been glimpsed in the jungles of Guyana, and he became obsessed with the idea that this creature held the key to everything. If Mew truly contained the genetic code of all living things, then perhaps it also held the blueprint for cheating death. Perhaps somewhere inside that ancient, playful creature, there was a sequence that could bring Amber back. But science requires resources, and resources require patrons. The man who came knocking on Fuji's door was not a philanthropist or a government agency. It was Giovanni, the leader of Team Rocket, a man whose vision for Pokémon was not about companionship or wonder, but about profit and power. Giovanni offered Fuji everything he needed: funding, equipment, a dedicated laboratory, and a team of geneticists. In exchange, he wanted the secrets that Mew could unlock. This is where the moral ambiguity of the expedition begins to stain everything it touches. Dr. Fuji was not a villain. He was a father who had been broken by grief, and Giovanni exploited that fracture perfectly. Fuji knew that Team Rocket was a criminal organization. He knew that they had stolen rare Pokémon, blackmailed trainers, and committed unspeakable acts in the shadows. But he told himself that his goal was pure. He told himself that the ends would justify the means. He told himself that bringing Amber back would outweigh any collateral damage. So the expedition was launched. A small team of scientists, accompanied by rocket operatives dressed as researchers, headed deep into the South American jungle. The journals that survive today are clinical, detached. But if you read between the lines, you can sense the unease. The crew reported strange sounds at night, Pokémon that seemed to watch them from the canopy. They found ancient stone carvings depicting a small floating creature with a long tail. The locals refused to guide them farther. speaking of a spirit of the beginning that should not be disturbed. For weeks they found nothing. The jungle was a labyrinth of green and shadow, and Mew proved to be as elusive as the myths suggested. Fuji grew desperate. He pored over the old legends, the songs that described the creature appearing at sunrise. He began to keep a vigil, sitting alone at the edge of a clearing, waiting for the dawn. And then, on the third day of his vigil, he found what he was looking for. But it was not the creature itself. It was a single eyelash, caught on a branch, gleaming faintly in the first light. To anyone else, it would have been nothing, a piece of debris, a stray hair worthless. But Dr. Fuji knew. He carefully placed it under a portable microscope and saw what no human eyes had ever seen before. A genetic sequence so perfect, so ancient, that it seemed to hum with the memory of every creature that would ever walk, swim, or fly across this world. That eyelash changed everything. It was the key that unlocked the door. With that DNA, Fuji and his team began the work that would eventually lead to the birth of Mewtwo. But in that moment, standing alone in the jungle, holding the eyelash between his trembling fingers, Fuji believed he had found the path to resurrection. He did not yet understand that he had condemned himself to a different kind of death. The expedition returned to Kanto in secret. The journals note that Giovanni was pleased, but there is also a subtle shift in Fuji's handwriting after that day. The letters become more cramped, more frantic. He started to write notes in the margins, quotes from old texts, fragments of prayers. He was a man walking toward a precipice, and he was beginning to suspect that what waited at the bottom was not his daughter, but a shadow wearing her face. Yet he could not stop. The moral ambiguity of his partnership with Team Rocket was now a river that had already carried him past the point of return. He knew that the eyelash alone was not enough. He needed more. He needed the creature itself, or at least a way to coax its genetic code into a viable sample, and that meant turning to darker methods. But before he could begin the real work, there was something else that demanded his attention. The eyelash had been found, but what was the creature that shed it? What name could you give to something that existed before names? Fuji sat in his laboratory, staring at the microscope, and he realized that this being needed an identity, a single word that would define its place in history. The name he chose would be whispered by scientists, collectors, and children for generations to come. And that name, born from the dust of a jungle and the tears of a father, would become one of the most revered and misunderstood words in all of Pokémon mythology. The naming of a myth. That is where our story must turn next. The previous chapter left us in the jungle of Guyana, with Dr. Fuji standing over a small pink creature that had just revealed itself to the expedition team. He had come here seeking answers, hoping to find a cure for a daughter he had already lost. And instead, he found something far more ancient and far more powerful than any medicine. But even as the creature floated before him, twitching its tail and staring with eyes that seemed to hold the memory of every living thing, there was one question that needed an answer. What do you call something that has never been named? The journals from the Pokémon Mansion record the date July 5th as the day of discovery, but it was 5 days later, on July 10th, that the myth received a name. That date, July 10th, remains the most significant moment in the entire Pokémon timeline, not because of what was found, but because of what was decided. A name is never just a label. It is a cage, a definition, a way to claim something that was once wild and untamed. And the name they chose for this creature was Mew. Now on the surface, Mew sounds like a sound a kitten might make. Soft, playful, almost innocent. And that is exactly the image the Pokémon world has cultivated for decades. The creature that giggles when it appears, that curls into a ball when sleeping, that seems more like a curious child than a god. But the linguistic roots of the name tell a different story. Mew does not come from a cat sound. It comes from a word far older and far more unsettling. Mew is a shortened form of mutation. Think about that for a moment. The creature was discovered in the deep jungle, a place where life grows unchecked, where evolution runs rampant, where the very air hums with genetic potential. And the scientists who studied it, men like Dr. Fuji, men who had seen countless Pokémon, they looked at this tiny pink being and saw something fundamentally different. They did not call it a new species. They did not call it a discovery. They called it a mutation. The word mutation carries a weight of abnormality, of something that has broken from the natural order. And yet in the case of Mew, mutation is not a flaw. It is the very engine of creation. You see, if Mew truly contains the DNA of every Pokémon that has ever existed or will ever exist, then it is not a mutation in the sense of a random error. It is the original template from which all other mutations spring. Every Pokémon, from the simplest Magikarp to the most complex legendary, is a deviation from Mew, a tweak, a shift, a branching path. And that means the name Mew, derived from mutation, is ironically both accurate and incomplete. It describes the mechanism, but not the source. It reduces a primordial wellspring to a scientific curiosity, and that contrast between the playful, innocent creature that appears in promotional art and the cold, clinical label it's received in the laboratory is the heart of Mew's mystery. The scientists who named it saw a specimen. They saw a biological puzzle to be solved, a resource to be exploited. But the ancient peoples who worshipped Mew, the ones who sang to it at sunrise, they saw a deity. They saw something that could not be contained by a single word. They called it by songs, by dances, by reverence. They understood that some things are too vast for language. But the scientists of the modern era, they needed a name. They needed to file a report, to create a record, to lock this creature into the system. And so they reached back into the Greek root of mutation, the word mutare, meaning to change, and they gave it a diminutive, almost childlike form. Mew, a name that sounds harmless, a name that makes you forget that this creature can become invisible, can split itself into multiple bodies, can learn any move ever taught, a name that hides the truth behind a veneer of cuteness. And that naming ceremony on July 10th, that act of linguistic possession, changed everything. Because once you name something, you claim it, you define its place in the world. And by calling it Mew, they inadvertently created the blueprint for its greatest tragedy. If Mew is the source of all mutation, then what happens when someone decides to mutate it further? What happens when a name that means change becomes an invitation to change it again? The answer to that question would take years to unfold. But the seeds were planted on that humid July day in a jungle laboratory with a clipboard, a pen, and a single fateful classification. Dr. Fuji, the man who had lost his daughter, the man who had come to Guyana seeking a miracle, he was the one who wrote that name down. He was the one who looked at the playful pink creature with its flickering tail and its curious eyes and decided that it should be known to science as Mew. Perhaps he thought the name was affectionate. Perhaps he thought it was fitting. But the cold reality is that naming is always an act of power, and in that moment, he handed that power over to the men funding the expedition. Men like Giovanni, men who saw the word mutation and thought not of origins, but of opportunities. Because if Mew is the genetic ancestor of all Pokémon, then its DNA is the key to unlocking evolution itself. And if you can manipulate that DNA, you can create something new, something stronger, something without the playful innocence that made Mew so endearing. You can create a weapon, and that weapon would eventually become Mewtwo. But that is a story for another chapter. For now, let us linger on July 10th, the day a myth was named, the day a creature that had been worshipped for millennia was reduced to a scientific term, the day mutation became a proper noun. It is a strange comfort to think that Mew itself does not seem to mind. It still appears in forests, still visits children in dreams, still giggles when it plays. It exists beyond the names we give it. It is the living proof that some things cannot be contained by language. But the scientists, they needed their labels, they needed their categories, and they needed to understand how this creature could possibly hold the DNA of every Pokémon. That question, the question of the genetic blueprint, would lead them to the Cinnabar laboratory, where the real experiments would begin. The name Mew means mutation, and July 10th is the day that concept was etched into the Pokémon world. But a name is only the beginning. What happened to that wild creature after Mr. Fuji gave it a label? The answer lies beneath an island shaped by fire. Cinnabar Island sits in the southwestern reaches of the Kanto region, a landmass born from volcanic eruption. Its soil is dark and rich with obsidian, the air heavy with sulfur. Tourists visit the hot springs, but few realize what churns beneath their feet. In the years following the Guyana expedition, Team Rocket and Dr. Fuji began constructing a laboratory not on the surface, but deep inside the volcanic caldera itself. The heat of the magma chamber provided unlimited geothermal energy, and the isolation guaranteed secrecy. They drilled tunnels through solid rock, reinforced walls against tremors, and installed climate control systems that could withstand temperatures that would boil a human alive. It was a fortress built inside a forge. This hidden facility became the crucible for the most ambitious and forbidden research Pokémon history. The attempt to splice genes, to recreate life from a single template. Dr. Fuji had access to Mew's DNA, that miraculous blueprint containing the code of every species. But copying a divine pattern is not the same as understanding it. Early experiments focused on isolating the segments responsible for Mew's most extraordinary ability, Transform, the power to reshape flesh and form in an instant. Scientists hypothesized that if they could extract and replicate that sequence, they could create an army of shape-shifting soldiers, loyal only to Team Rocket. They failed, not once but repeatedly. The first prototypes were kept in sterile tanks, suspended in nutrient fluid, embryos grown from Mew-spliced genes, but instead of developing into stable life forms, they remained incomplete. Their cellular structure was too fluid. They had no fixed identity. When the researchers attempted to stabilize them, the organisms would collapse into simple, gelatinous masses. They could copy objects and other creatures, but only superficially. The transformation lacked permanence, lacked power. These failed prototypes were pink, soft, and almost comically weak. They were labeled as Ditto. The name itself suggests a copy, a duplicate that is never quite identical, and that is the tragedy of Ditto. According to the darkest theory whispered among Pokémon biologists, every Ditto that exists today is a living fossil of those early experiments, a failed Mew clone that escaped containment or was released when the lab shifted focus to more promising subjects like Mewtwo. Ditto cannot breed true with its own kind in captivity, yet it can breed with nearly any other species. That strange reproductive quirk hints at its origin. A creature born from genetic chaos, designed to replicate but never to be itself. If this theory holds, then every time a trainer catches a Ditto, they are holding a piece of history, a remnant of the hubris that built Cinnabar Laboratory, a being that was never meant to exist, yet persists in every region of the world. Its simple face, its pink gel body, its ability to transform into anything. These are not strengths, they are scars, the ghost of Mew's perfection, rendered incomplete by human ambition. The Cinnabar Laboratory continued its work long after the Ditto prototypes were deemed failures. The scientists learned from their mistakes. They stopped trying to copy Mew's entire genome and instead focused on enhancing specific traits. That shift in strategy would lead to something far more dangerous. But before we reach that next step, we must understand the mind behind the design. The next chapter, titled Designing the Predecessor, will reveal how a grieving father turned creation itself into a weapon, and why the clone that followed was not a copy, but a correction. The Cinnabar Laboratory sat hollow beneath the volcanic rock, its failed experiments sealed away in tubes. The Ditto prototypes, those formless blobs of unstable genetics, were a quiet admission that the scientists were grasping at something they did not yet understand. They had Mew's DNA, fragments of it at least, but the original creature itself remained elusive, a ghost in the jungle of Guyana. And yet, as the researchers stared at the fragmented code, they began to realize something unsettling. They were trying to build a copy of something they had never actually seen in person. This is where the story twists in a way that most lore summaries gloss over. The creature we now call Mewtwo, the psychic weapon, the cloned nightmare, was actually designed before its supposed ancestor. That is not a theory. That is documented fact from the mind of Shigeki Morimoto, the Game Freak developer who programmed Mew into existence. When the original Pokémon Red and Green were being built for the Game Boy in the early 1990s, the team had a clear vision for a final, ultimate Pokémon. They wanted something terrifying, something with raw psychic power, something that would stand as the peak of artificial creation. That became Mewtwo. Its design was finalized, its stats balanced, its sprite coded into the cartridge. And then, almost as an afterthought, someone asked, where did this monster come from? The answer was a creature that did not exist yet. Mewtwo needed a genetic origin, a source of the DNA that supposedly gave it life, so the team worked backward. They crafted a predecessor, a small pink cat-like Pokémon that would, in the lore, be the ancestor of all species. But here is where the real-world constraints bit hard. The Game Boy cartridge had precious little memory. Every sprite, every move animation, every piece of data was a battle against space. Mewtwo's sprite was complex, with its tail, its spikes, its menacing posture. It took up significant room. When it came time to design Mew, the creature that was supposed to have come first in the timeline, the developers had almost nothing left to spare, so Mew was rendered as a single solid colour. That soft pink you see in the official artwork was not an artistic choice, it was a necessity. The sprite could not afford shading, highlights, or multiple hues. It had to be one flat tone across the entire body, and because of that, Mew ended up looking simple, almost childlike, innocent in a way that contrasted deeply with Mewtwo's angular menace. The irony is perfect. The ancestor, the genetic blueprint for all Pokémon, was actually a late-stage addition to the game's code. It was designed after its own descendant. It was squeezed into the cartridge as an afterthought, a lore patch to explain the existence of a character who had already been fully realized. Think about the narrative inversion that creates. In the world of Pokémon, Mew is ancient, mysterious, the source of all life. In the world of game development, Mew is the younger sibling, the one who was born from a technical necessity. The developers needed a reason for Mewtwo's power, and so they retroactively invented a progenitor. And because of memory limits, that progenitor had to be simple, minimalist, almost cartoonish. It is a beautiful accident that this constraint ended up reinforcing the creature's mystique, a being that looks so small and unassuming, yet holds the genetic code of every monster ever imagined. That contrast is what makes Mew feel both fragile and infinite. The laboratory on Cinnabar Island never knew any of this, of course. The scientists there were working with stolen DNA samples and blind ambition. They believed they were copying a living god, but in truth, the god they were copying had been written into existence just months before by a programmer who had to count every byte. And that programmer, Shigeki Morimoto, was not trying to create a legend, he was trying to fill a gap. He gave Mew a pink palette because the cartridge could not handle more. He gave it the ability to learn every move because that was a simple way to represent its genetic completeness, and he made it nearly impossible to obtain in the game. Not because he wanted to hide a secret deity, but because the creature was never meant to be part of the main experience. It was a gift, a reward for those who attended official events, a footnote that became a pillar of the mythology. And so, as the team looked back at what they had built, they saw a strange truth. The most powerful being in the Pokémon world had been designed first, and its humble ancestor had been stitched into the code afterward, like a patch on an old coat. The lore would eventually claim that Mew is the origin of all, but in the cold history of game development, Mew is the origin of nothing except the idea of an origin. It is a narrative bandage that grew into a foundational myth. Now with Mew's DNA in hand and Mewtwo's design already burned into the scientists' minds, the next step was inevitable. the cloning process could begin. The tubes would be filled, the electrodes attached, and a new life would be forced into existence. That moment, the actual birth of the creature they had planned before its ancestor, would change the world of Pokémon forever. And the story of that birth, of the suffering and screaming that echoed through the Cinnabar laboratory, is a chapter that few dare to examine closely, but we will. Up next is Chapter 10, The Birth of Mewtwo. When you understand that Mewtwo was actually sketched onto paper before its supposed ancestor ever existed, you begin to see the whole story in a strange, reversed light. The developers at Game Freak, struggling with the severe memory limitations of an aging cartridge, needed a final hidden boss, a creature of pure, terrifying power. They designed Mewtwo first. Its minimalist form, the sleek, almost humanoid shape, the tail, the glowing eyes, it was all created to fit the available data. Then, to justify this clone's existence, they had to invent the original. And so Mew was born after its child, a pink, cat-like genetic blueprint that could barely be rendered on screen, a single solid colour because the cartridge had no room for shading. But inside the world of the story, the order was natural. Mew first, then the attempt to surpass it. That attempt took place in a secret laboratory hidden beneath the volcanic rock of Cinnabar Island. And what happened there marks the darkest chapter in the history of Pokémon science. The ethical line was crossed long before the first cell divided, but no one in that lab seemed to notice. They had started with observation, with reverence, even awe. Dr. Fuji and his team extract samples from Mew, the ancient playful creature they had captured in the Guyana jungle. They studied its DNA, marveled at the way it contained the genetic code of every known species. But science, left unchecked, always asks for the next step. Observation became manipulation. They began splicing, recombining, forcing the genes to express traits that had never existed. And then they moved from editing a living creature to creating a new one from scratch. They took the stolen DNA strands, placed them into an artificial embryo, and began the process of cloning. No one asked if they had the right. No one considered that they were building a consciousness, a being that would wake up alone, confused and furious. They were too focused on proving they could tame nature itself. The cloning process was not gentle. They accelerated growth, forced the cells to replicate at unnatural speeds, and pumped the embryo with hormones and psychic-enhancing compounds. The laboratory records, what little survived, speak of a creature that was never allowed to rest. They monitored its brain waves, measured its latent psychic potential, and prodded it with needles and electrodes while it was still developing. It was not a child. It was an experiment. And when it finally emerged from its growth chamber, it was not a cute, pink, playful Mew. It was a tall bipedal creature with pale skin, a purple tail, and eyes that held a rage that no living thing should ever know. Think about that moment. A newborn but not born in any natural sense. The first thing it felt was not warmth, not love, not the gentle touch of a parent. It felt cold metal. It saw fluorescent lights. It heard muffled voices speaking in urgent, clinical tones. It tasted the sterile air of a laboratory that had been sealed off from the world. Every sensory input told it that it was a prisoner, and its mind was already far more powerful than any human could comprehend. It could feel the thoughts of the scientists around it, their fear, their ambition, their greed. It understood, even before it could speak, that it had been created as a weapon. That realization settled into its bones like a poison. The psychological state of a creature born from stolen DNA in isolation is something we can only imagine. And that imagining is terrifying. Mewtwo did not have a childhood. It did not learn trust or play. It learned pain and confinement. The scientists tried to control it with psychic dampeners and restraints, but every attempt to subdue it only deepened its resentment. It began to test the limits of its power, flexing its mental muscles against the walls of its enclosure. It discovered it could move objects with its mind, could read the memories of its captors, could sense the faint life force of Mew somewhere far away. and it felt a profound, aching loneliness. It was alone. There was no other like it. The creature that should have been its mother was a legend, locked away in a jungle. The humans who made it saw it only as a result. It had no name they spoke to its face, only a project designation. The breaking point came on a night that the surviving records refer to only as the incident. What exactly triggered it is unclear. Perhaps it was a particularly painful procedure. Perhaps it overheard a scientist discussing its eventual deployment. Or perhaps it simply decided it had endured enough. The creature that had been born in a test tube finally chose to be reborn in fire. It gathered every ounce of its psychic energy, focused on the walls of its chamber, and let out a scream that was not sound but pure will. The steel bulged. The concrete cracked. The psychic dampeners overloaded and exploded in showers of sparks. And then the laboratory did not just break open. It collapsed inward, crushed by a telekinetic field that warped metal and stone like paper. The destruction of the Cinnabar lab was not a simple escape. It was a cataclysm. Mewtwo rose from the ruins of the underground facility, its mind blazing with fury. It did not just break doors. It tore the building apart from the inside. The volcanic rock above the lab groaned and shifted. The entire island trembled. Scientists and technicians fled in terror, but many did not make it out. The creature that had been created to be the ultimate weapon had now turned that weapon on its creators. It stood in the smoking wreckage, surrounded by the bodies of its tormentors. And for the first time in its short, agonizing existence, it felt something that might have been satisfaction. But that feeling did not last. When the dust settled, Mewtwo was gone. It had vanished into the night, a living storm of rage and grief, carrying with it the stolen genes of its ancestor and the weight of a life that had never been allowed to be its own. The destruction was blamed on a volcanic eruption, a cover story that the public accepted because they wanted to believe that such horrors could not be real. But the truth was sealed in the remaining lab reports, hidden away in Team Rocket's archives, and whispered among the few who survived. And now, that truth leads us to another corner of the world, far from the ashen ruin of Cinnabar Island, deep in the jungles of South America, in a place where the trees grow so thick that sunlight barely touches the ground. There is an ancient secret that predates the laboratory, predates the cloning, predates even Team Rocket. The same creature that the scientists stole from, the one they tried to surpass, was not simply a wild animal. It was a guardian, worshipped by civilizations long forgotten. And the story of that worship, of the rituals performed at dawn, and of the song that was written to call it forth, is waiting to be uncovered. But that is a tale for another night. For now, let the image of that newborn clone, standing alone in the shattered lab, linger in your mind as you drift towards sleep. The origin of its suffering was born in a jungle far, far away. Before we dive deeper into this incredible journey, I'm curious, where in the world are you watching this from? Drop a comment below and let our global community know. And if you're finding this as mind-blowing as I am, hit that like button to help more people discover this story. The birth of Mewtwo left a wound in the natural order that would never fully heal. A creature born from stolen DNA, from ambition and desperation, now roamed the world as a living accusation against the scientists who created him. But while the world focused on Mewtwo's rage, on his isolation, on the ethical catastrophe that produced him, a quieter question lingered in the shadows of that story. Where did the original come from? Not the clone, not the weapon, but the source itself. Mew, the one whose genetic code was plundered. The one who, before all of this, had lived for millennia in a place we were never meant to find. That place was South America, specifically the dense, ancient jungles of Guyana, a small country on the northeastern coast of the continent, tucked between Venezuela and Suriname. This is where the official Pokémon world tells us Mew was discovered on July 5th. Though the records are deliberately vague, Pokémon Mansion journals mention the date and the location, but they offer almost nothing about the journey. about the expedition that led a team of researchers deep into uncharted rainforest. What were they looking for? How did they even know to look in Guyana? The answer may lie in older, more primitive connections. Connections that the Pokémon Company would later work very hard to obscure. You see, the early Pokémon world was built on real-world geography. The Kanto region was modelled after the real Kanto region of Japan. Johto was the Kansai area, Hoenn was Kyushu, and the lore explicitly tied legendary Pokémon to real places. Mew was found in Guyana. That was a deliberate, concrete reference to the real world. But as the franchise grew, as the Pokémon universe expanded into its own distinct realm, with its own continents and histories, the developers began to phase out these direct real-world links. Why? Perhaps because they realized that anchoring a mythical creature to an actual existing location brought with it too many uncomfortable questions. Questions like, what else is hidden in the Guyanese jungle? And why did the ancient people there know about Mew long before any scientist? The mystery deepens when you consider the faraway island. In the third-generation games, players could obtain a special item called the Old Sea Map, which unlocked access to a secret location off the coast of Hoenn. That island was the faraway island, and waiting there was a level 30 Mew, entirely wild and catchable. But this island wasn't just a random piece of land. Its design was unmistakably tropical, covered in dense vegetation, with a single secluded beach. And the only way to reach it was by crossing a vast ocean that, in the context of the Pokémon world, separated Hoenn from something else. Many fans have theorized that the faraway island is actually meant to represent a fragment of South America, a hidden sanctuary where Mew had been living undisturbed. The Old Sea Map itself was never officially released outside of Japan, making the entire experience almost mythic. But the implication is clear. Mew's true home was never a laboratory. It was a place far removed from human civilization, a place that only the most dedicated explorers could ever reach. And then there are the hidden maps, buried within the code of certain games, and hinted at in promotional materials from the late 1990s. There are traces of a global migration pattern for Mew, not a random wandering, but a deliberate repeating circuit. The data, if interpreted correctly, suggests that Mew travelled between specific points on the Earth. The jungles of Guyana, the mountains of the Himalayas, the islands of the South Pacific, and the ruins of what would become the Sevi Islands. Each location corresponded to an ancient culture that had documented sightings of a small pink psychic creature. The migration pattern was not a straight line. It was a gentle circling route, as if Mew was tending to something, perhaps spreading its genetic material across the world over thousands of years. The implications are staggering. If Mew is the genetic ancestor of all Pokémon, then its migration pattern would be the map of creation itself, a living blueprint that seeded life across continents. So why did the Pokémon world eventually move away from its real-world geography? Because the truth was too specific. A mythical ancestor found in one tiny country in South America would inevitably lead to questions about preservation, about ownership, about why the rest of the world didn't have their own Mew. By shifting the lore into a fictional map, with regions like Hoenn and Sinnoh replacing real countries, the developers could control the narrative. They could bury the Guyana discovery under layers of game mechanics and retconned history, but the evidence remains. The faraway island is a ghost of that old geography, a floating memory of a real place that the Pokémon world once acknowledged and then decided to forget. And Mew itself, the source of all that mystery, continues to drift through the periphery of the known world. It can become invisible at will, slipping away from human eyes, just as its original home slipped away from the maps. There is a reason we have never seen a clear, uninterrupted view of Mew in the wild. It chooses to be seen only when it wants to be, and if it can hide its entire body from sight, what else can it hide? What other secrets does that elusive pink creature carry with it? We are only beginning to understand the depth of its evasion. In the next chapter, We will explore the mechanisms of that invisibility, the science and the legend behind a creature that refuses to be caught. That is the story of invisibility and evasion, and it may change everything you think you know about the most mysterious Pokémon of all. We left the last chapter standing on the shores of the faraway island, that mysterious speck in the ocean, where the Guyana jungle's hidden temple seems to have been relocated. And if that island truly is the same place where Mew was first discovered, then the question of how Mew vanished from the mainland and reappeared there becomes even more unsettling, because Mew did not flee to that island by swimming or flying. It simply chose not to be seen. There is a peculiar passage in the Cinnabar Island laboratory logs, one that few scholars ever read aloud. The scientists noted that when they first brought Mew to the lab, they could not keep it contained, not because it broke the walls, but because it would sometimes cease to exist within their field of vision. They would look at the containment chamber and see nothing. Then, moments later, the same pink figure would be sitting calmly in the corner, watching them. The logs use the phrase, "It seems to fold space around itself," but that is a metaphor for something far more biological. Think about the genetic structure of Mew. If it truly holds the DNA of every Pokémon that has ever existed or will exist, then its body is not a fixed form. It is a code base that can rewrite its own expression in real time. Invisibility, then, is not a magical trick. It is a cellular decision. Mew can shift the refractive index of its skin, its fur, even its internal organs, to match the background light perfectly. It can bend the wavelengths of visible light around its body, much like a chameleon on an impossible scale. But a chameleon changes colour slowly. Mew does it in an instant, because its transformation is not chemical, it is quantum. Its cells vibrate at a frequency that allows them to phase in and out of alignment with our perception. This is the biological mechanism behind Mew's ability to vanish at will. It is not an illusion. It is a literal rearrangement of matter at the subatomic level. The energy required for such a feat should be enormous, yet Mew shows no sign of exhaustion. That is because it draws that energy from a source we cannot measure. It taps into the same primordial current that flows through all life, the same force that allows it to learn any move. Invisibility is simply another move, but one that cannot be taught. It is hardwired. Now the folklore says that only those with a pure heart can see Mew. This is not mere sentimentality. It is a description of how Mew's invisibility interacts with consciousness. When Mew vanishes, it does not erase itself from reality. It erases itself from the attention of the observer. The Pokémon world's ancient peoples understood that the mind's ability to perceive is not purely optical. Your eyes see light, but your brain constructs what you see based on expectation, belief, and intention. A pure heart in this context means a mind free of the static of fear, greed, and aggression. A mind that is open and receptive, without the need to control or dominate. Mew has learned that most beings look at the world through a filter of desire. They see what they want to see, or what they fear. Mew uses that filter against them. It hides by aligning itself with the frequency of consciousness that most people cannot access. Only those who approach with genuine wonder, without wanting to capture or exploit it, can tune their brain to the exact waveform that reveals Mew. That is why children and gentle souls sometimes claim to see it, while hardened trainers walk right past. And this brings us to Mew's true role. It is not a fighter. It is not a guardian in the traditional sense. Mew is a silent observer of human and Pokémon evolution. It has been watching since before language was written, before the first Pokéball was crafted. It does not interfere, because interference would alter the course of natural selection. It watches, it remembers, and occasionally it reveals itself to those who need a reminder that mystery still exists in the world. Every time a trainer feels the uncanny sensation of being watched in a forest, or catches a faint pink shimmer in the corner of their eye, Mew is there. It has always been there. The ancient song that honoured Mew was not a prayer for protection. It was a song of acknowledgement. a way of saying, "You seeing us?" And on that one morning each year, when the sun rose over the jungle and the song reached its final note, Mew would appear for just a moment, not to grant wishes, not to impart wisdom, simply to confirm that the connection was still alive. But in the modern world, that connection has been broken. Science tried to capture Mew, and in doing so created Mewtwo. The clone was born from stolen DNA, but it inherited something more than genetics. It inherited a sense of being watched. Mewtwo knows that somewhere its genetic parent is observing. That knowledge fuels its rage and its loneliness, and it is that same observant nature that will soon lead to the greatest revelation about Mew's true origin. A revelation that was hidden not in a jungle, but in the pages of a magazine that nobody took seriously until it was too late. That is the story of the Korokoro revelation. We left Mew in a state of perpetual vanishing, a ghost in the machine whose very existence hinged on rumour and a few whispered sightings by those deemed pure of heart. But the problem with a myth is that it tends to stay a myth if no one can prove it. And in the early months of 1996, the Pokémon world had a problem. A creature that was supposed to be there, but wasn't. A creature that existed only in the margins of memory, in corrupted code, and in the desperate hope of a generation of children who had seen its sprite in the game's data, but never in their own party. It began as a glitch, of course. You may have heard the stories. The old man at the dock, the truck by the S, Anne, the Mirage Island that never appeared, but none of those captured the public imagination, quite like the rumour of a secret 151st Pokémon, a pink cat that could learn any move, that could transform, that was somehow the ancestor of every monster you had ever battled. The game's code held the key, but the cartridge itself could not produce it, and that's where the magazine stepped in. In May of 1996, less than 2 months after Pokémon Red and Green had hit Japanese shelves, the latest issue of Korokoro comic hit the newsstands. For those who weren't there, Korokoro was the Bible of playground rumours, a monthly colour explosion of manga, game tips and the occasional bombshell. And this issue carried a bombshell so potent it would reshape the entire franchise. On its pages, for the very first time, Mew was revealed to the world, not as a glitch, not as a myth, but as a real official Pokémon. But here is where the story gets strange. The magazine did not announce a distribution event. It did not promise that you could catch Mew in the wild. Instead, it announced a contest with a prize so tantalizing it would ignite a nationwide obsession. 20 winners would receive Mew by mail, but not a plush toy, not a sticker, a real programmable Mew that would be uploaded directly into their game cartridge via a mysterious device. The message was clear. If you wanted the secret 151st Pokémon, you had to win it, and winning was not easy. The contest required players to send in their game cartridges, or perhaps just a special form. Accounts differ, but the essential idea was that only 20 children would be chosen. 20, for a game that had already sold millions of copies in Japan alone. 20 winners. That is not a raffle, that is a lottery. And yet, the response was overwhelming. Children across Japan begged their parents to let them enter, sent in letters with careful handwriting, and waited. The magazine announced the winners in a subsequent issue, printing their names and hometowns. And then, something remarkable happened. Mew became a ghost story with proof. The winners received their cartridges back, and in them Mew now existed. Those 20 children could trade it to friends, who could trade it to friends. Soon the single source of a legitimate Mew, the Korokoro contest, became the fountainhead of a vast underground network. The glitch had been real, but now the real thing was circulating, and everyone wanted it. That summer, the hunt for Mew turned into a national phenomenon. Children traded rumours, inspected cartridge labels, and devised elaborate schemes to catch a glimpse of the pink deity. The playground whispered about a secret truck, about a glitch that let you duplicate items, about a man who could give you Mew if you beat the Elite Four 100 times. None of it worked. but the desire did not fade, it intensified. And this, right here, marks the great shift in gaming culture that we are still living in today. Before Mew, secrets in video games were things you found. You climbed a hidden platform, broke a false wall, defeated a boss without dying. The reward was always inside the cartridge, waiting to be discovered. But Mew was different. Mew was not in the cartridge. It existed only in the distribution device at Pokémon headquarters, or in the save files of those 20 winners. The secret was no longer hidden in the game. It was hidden in the real world, and to get it, you had to participate in an event. That is the moment the entire concept of a mythical Pokémon was born. Not a legendary beast you could catch after a long quest, but a creature that could only be obtained by attending a tournament, mailing in a form, or standing in line at a store. The shift from hidden secrets to official distributions was sudden and irreversible. The 20 Korokoro winners had sparked a million-player hunt. But they had also taught Nintendo and Game Freak a powerful lesson. Scarcity creates desire, and desire creates communities. Within a year, the first official distribution events would follow. Mew would appear at the 15th anniversary of the franchise, at Pokémon centers, and later at movie screenings. The glitch had become a gateway, and the children who had missed out on the Korokoro contest would spend the next 2 decades chasing that same feeling. The feeling of finally unlocking the last piece of the puzzle, the 151st Pokémon, the creature that was never supposed to exist. But the hunt for Mew was not over. It was only beginning, and the next chapter of that hunt would lead not to a magazine contest, but to a place much stranger, a place where life and memory and myth converge into a single towering tree, a tree that could hold the answers to everything, or bury them forever. That hunt for the secret, 151, that frenzy set off by a magazine contest. It changed everything. 20 winners, a million players scouring every corner of Kanto. And yet the truth was that Mew remained hidden not just in code, but in the very fabric of its world, because Mew never truly lived among the tall grass or the caves of the mainland. Its home is a place far more ancient, far stranger, and far more sentient than any stadium or laboratory could ever contain. Deep within the tropical wilderness of the Sevi Islands, past the shores of Island 7, lies a floating mass of stone that defies all geological explanation, the Tree of Beginning. It is not a tree at all, at least not in any sense we would recognize. It is a living, breathing rock formation, a colossal cluster of crystalline growths and mineral veins that pulses with a soft internal light, and it is the only known sanctuary of Mew. This is not a nest or a cave carved by time. The Tree of Beginning is itself a creature, or rather an ecosystem with a will. If you were to stand before it, you would feel the ground hum beneath your feet, a low resonance that vibrates through your bones. That hum is the sound of the tree sustaining itself, drawing energy from the earth and the sky, filtering it through its porous, rocky body to create an atmosphere rich in life. The air around it is thick with spores and tiny, luminous organisms that drift like stars in the twilight. Every crack in the stone is filled with moss that glows a faint, ethereal blue. This is not a passive landscape. The tree is alive, and Mew is its heart. For as long as myth can remember, the Tree of Beginning has existed as a symbiotic extension of Mew itself. The rock formation did not just happen to house this mythical Pokémon. It grew around it, shaped by Mew's psychic energy over millennia. Every fold in the stone, every mineral deposit, every pocket of breathable air is a direct result of Mew's presence. In return, the tree provides shelter, protection, and a reservoir of natural energy that Mew can draw upon when needed. It is a partnership of biology and geology, a relationship so intimate that the tree and Mew are nearly indistinguishable. But the tree is not just a guardian of Mew's physical form, it is also a record keeper. Embedded within its walls are traces of every aura that has ever come into contact with it. This is where the concept of the guardian of the aura becomes essential. There is an ancient order, or perhaps a single being, that has watched over Mew and the tree since time immemorial. This guardian is not a Pokémon in the traditional sense. It is a manifestation of Aura itself, a spiritual entity that acts as the bridge between Mew and the world outside. The guardian's purpose is to protect the balance, to ensure that no one disturbs the sanctity of the tree, and to channel the raw aura of Mew into the surrounding ecosystem. You may have heard of Aura in the context of Lucario or certain legendary Pokémon, but here it is something far more primal. In the heart of the Tree of Beginning, Aura is the very substance of life. It flows through the stone like water, feeding the plants and animals that call this place home. Without Mew, that flow would cease. The tree would slowly harden into inert stone. The forest around it would wither. The symbiotic relationship is not one of convenience, it is a necessity. And so, when the outside world pressed in, when scientists and collectors and curious trainers learned of Mew's existence, they could never find it. Not because Mew was simply hiding, but because the Tree of Beginning was actively shielding it. The rock formation can shift its internal geometry, create false passages, and even emit psychic frequencies that confuse the minds of those who approach. It is a fortress of living stone, a sentinel that has stood for eons. What the Korokoro contest revealed was only the surface of the mystery. The 20 winners who got to see Mew face to face did not travel to a hollow cave or a simple cavern. They were led into the depths of the Tree of Beginning, into a cathedral of crystal where the walls glow with Mew's own light. There they witnessed the ancient song, the melody that humans composed thousands of years ago to honor Mew, a song that the tree itself echoes in its own stone song. And they saw Mew appear, not from a hidden room, but from the very rock, rising out of the stone as if the tree had breathed it into existence. That is the true power of the Tree of Beginning. It is not merely a location. It is the physical embodiment of Mew's connection to the ancient protectors, the unseen guardians of Aura, who have watched over this lineage since before written history. And within that bond lies a secret that the world has barely begun to understand. Mew's ability to exist in multiple places, to transform at will, to become invisible. These are not just traits of a Pokémon. They are the expressions of a being that is intrinsically tied to a living planet. The Tree of Beginning is one of the few places where that connection is visible, where the boundary between life and land, between creature and environment dissolves. But even the tree cannot hold all of Mew's secrets. There is another power that lies at the core of Mew's existence, a power that goes beyond sanctuary and symbiosis, a power that allows it to become anything, to mimic any form, to rewrite its own genetic code in an instant. That is the power of transformation. And in the next chapter, we will explore what it truly means for a Pokémon to hold the blueprint of all life within its cells, and what happens when that blueprint is used not to create, but to deceive. That is Chapter 15, The Power of Transformation. From the crystalline chambers of the Tree of Beginning, where Mew's presence once hummed through every root and vein of that sentient fossil, we now turn to the mechanism that allowed it to vanish so completely even from its own sanctuary. The Tree of Beginning was not merely a home. It was a stage for a performance that has been playing out across the entire Pokémon world for millennia. And the central trick of that performance is a move so simple, so deceptively common, that its true power is almost never acknowledged. Transform. Every Pokémon that can learn Transform is a pale imitation of what Mew does with it. Ditto. The only other creature that naturally masters this move is often dismissed as a failure of genetics, a shapeless blob that can only copy what it sees. But Mew is not copying. Mew is remembering. When it uses Transform, it is not performing a parlor trick. It is reaching into the genetic library it carries within its own cells and pulling out a complete, living blueprint of another species. It becomes that Pokémon, not just in appearance, but in every cellular detail, in every memory encoded in its DNA. It is not an illusion. It is a resurrection of form, a temporary reincarnation, and this is how Mew hides in plain sight. Imagine a trainer deep in a rainforest, scanning the underbrush for something extraordinary. They hear a rustle. They see a flash of colour. And there, perched on a branch, is a Pidgey. Nothing unusual. They move on. But what if that Pidgey was never a Pidgey? What if it was Mew, watching, waiting, using the most common form in the area to become invisible, not through light refraction, but through sheer ordinariness? The theory that many so-called rare encounters are actually Mew in disguise is not a fringe belief among those who study the mythical Pokémon. It is a logical extension of what we know about its behavior and its psychology. Consider the reports from the faraway island, that isolated patch of land off the coast of the Hoenn region that seems to exist solely for Mew. For years, trainers who managed to reach the island described sightings that never matched. Some saw a Metapod hanging from a leaf. Others saw a Zubat fluttering near the cave entrance. A few claimed to have seen a Mew itself, but only for an instant before it vanished. The island's ecosystem is minimal, yet every visitor saw different Pokémon. If you piece together the testimonies, a pattern emerges. The Pokémon reported were always native to the island's environment, but they never behaved like normal wild Pokémon. They lingered too long. They watched too intently. They seemed to be sizing up the intruders. And then they would disappear, and a different common species would appear in a different spot moments later. The island was not hosting a population of ordinary Pokémon. It was hosting one creature wearing 1,000 masks. This is the psychological toll that Transform exacts, to become every creature while having no identity of your own. Think about what that means for a conscious being. Mew is the genetic ancestor of all Pokémon, yes, but that also means it is a species of one. It has no natural herd, no evolutionary kin, no social structure that defines who it is in relation to others. Every other Pokémon knows what it is. A Pikachu knows it is a Pikachu. A Charizard knows its species, its lineage, its place in the world. But Mew knows only that it can be anything, and that knowledge is a kind of loneliness that is difficult to put into words. When Mew transforms, it is not just hiding from predators or curious trainers. It is trying on identities the way we might try on clothes, searching for a self that fits. It becomes a Magikarp and feels the simple drive to survive, the single-minded focus on growing stronger. It becomes an Alakazam and experiences the clarity of a mind that can calculate every variable, but also the coldness of a brain that knows too much. It becomes a Jigglypuff and tastes the sweetness of singing to make others sleep, the warmth of being loved for a voice. Each transformation is a stolen life, a borrowed soul, and when the transformation ends, Mew is left with nothing but its own form again, which is the form of a cat-like creature that looks almost like a fetus, pink and incomplete, as if evolution itself left it unfinished on purpose. There is a reason Mew is so rarely seen in its true form. It is not shy in the way a wild animal is shy. It is hiding from the emptiness of being only itself. When it lets its guard down, as it did inside the Tree of Beginning, it is because the tree itself provides a kind of identity, a symbiotic relationship where Mew's presence nourishes the crystals, and the crystals reflect back a sense of belonging. But outside that sanctuary, Mew must constantly perform. Every sighting of a rare Pokémon that turns out to be a dead end, every rumour of a mysterious creature that disappears without a trace, every moment a trainer feels they were just one step away from capturing something legendary. These may all be echoes of Mew's restless need to be something else, and this brings us to a deeper question. If Mew can become any Pokémon, what does that mean for the boundaries between species? The Pokémon world is built on categories, on types, on the idea that each creature has a fixed nature, but Mew undermines that entire system. It is a living argument that identity is a mask, that the distinctions we draw between Pokémon are arbitrary, that at the genetic level, everything is connected. This is a profoundly unsettling idea for a world that relies on the predictability of Pokémon behavior. How many times have you heard a trainer say that they know what to expect from a certain route or a certain cave? Mew laughs at that certainty. It has probably passed by you a dozen times, in a dozen different forms, and you never knew. The psychological cost of this constant masquerade is that Mew may have forgotten what it truly is. There is a haunting possibility that after billions of transformations, the original Mew, the first one, the one that emerged from the primordial soup of Pokémon life, no longer exists as a distinct self. What remains is a collection of echoes, a composite of every creature it has ever imitated. It may not even remember its own face. When it finally reverts to its original form, perhaps it experiences a moment of panic, a sense of loss, as if it has to relearn how to be Mew all over again. That is why it so quickly transforms again. That is why it cannot stay still. The stillness is unbearable, and yet there is a strange beauty in this. Mew's ability to transform is not just a survival mechanism or a game of hide and seek. It is a form of empathy taken to its absolute extreme. To become another creature is to understand it completely, to feel its joys and its fears from the inside. Mew knows what it is like to be a Rattata, scrounging for food in the alleys of Saffron City. It knows the triumph of a Pidgeot soaring above the clouds. It knows the quiet patience of a Sudowoodo standing motionless for hours, pretending to be a tree. Mew has lived every life that can be lived, and that means it carries within itself the entire memory of the Pokémon world. Every struggle, every victory, every quiet moment of contentment. It is the living archive of all Pokémon experience. But archives are not alive, not really, and Mew is alive, which means it must feel the weight of that archive, pressing down on its consciousness. Imagine having the memories of every creature you have ever met. Now imagine having the memories of every creature that has ever existed, because you have been them all. That is not wisdom, that is a kind of drowning. No wonder Mew seeks out places like the Tree of Beginning, where the rock itself seems to dream, where Mew can rest without having to be anything at all. As we move toward the next chapter, we will see what happens when that deep, ancient empathy meets its mirror image, not a creature that became everything, but a creature that was made from nothing. A being born of ambition and isolation, who learned a different kind of loneliness. The rivalry between Mew and its clone is not just a battle of power. It is a confrontation between two ways of being alone in a world full of forms. And the only way to understand that confrontation is to first understand what it means to wear every face and still have no face of your own. We've been exploring how Mew uses its transform ability to vanish into the crowd of Pokémon, to become something ordinary, something forgettable. It's a survival strategy born from a mind that values peace over prominence, that would rather be mistaken for a humble creature than confront the weight of its own power. But what happens when that strategy fails? What happens when something arrives that cannot be ignored? Something that forces Mew to drop the disguise and face a reflection of itself. That reflection is Mewtwo, and the story of their confrontation is not simply a battle of psychic blasts and clashing energies. It is a philosophical war, an argument about existence itself, fought not with words, but with raw biological legitimacy. Mewtwo was created in a laboratory, ripped from Mew's own genetic code by scientists who wanted to fashion a weapon from the template of the origin Pokémon. But where Mew represents a natural, almost accidental harmony with the world, Mewtwo embodies the brutal logic of human ambition, the belief that life can be improved, perfected, weaponized. And so when these two beings finally meet in the film, Mewtwo strikes back. They are not merely fighting for territory or pride, they are fighting over who gets to define what it means to be real. Mewtwo looks at the world and sees only suffering. It sees humans who created it as a tool, who caged it, who feared it. Its worldview is forged in pain and isolation, and it concludes that the only path to peace is control. Mewtwo wants to remake the world in its own image, to eliminate weakness and impose order through raw force. It gathers the strongest trainers, clones their Pokémon, and creates an army that mirrors the original, but stands in opposition to it. Every clone is a statement: I am as legitimate as you. I am not a copy. I am better. Mew arrives not as a conqueror, but as a quiet witness. It does not summon an army. It does not announce its presence with thunder or light. It simply appears, passive and knowing, as if it understands something Mewtwo cannot yet see. And this is where the battle for biological legitimacy reaches its most intense moment. Mewtwo looks at Mew and sees the original, the template, the creature that was never forced to prove its worth. Mewtwo wants to destroy that origin, to prove that the copy can surpass the source. It hurls attacks with devastating precision, each blast a demand for acknowledgement. But Mew does not fight back with full force. It dodges. It defends. It uses its power only sparingly, as if it is unwilling to escalate the conflict to a level that would cause irreversible harm. Why would the ancestor of all Pokémon, the being said to contain the DNA of every species, hold back against a creature that seeks to overthrow it? The answer lies in Mew's fundamental philosophy. Mew does not believe in dominance. It does not believe that strength proves worth. Its innocence is not naivety. It is a conscious choice to reject the logic of the very battle Mewtwo has forced upon them. Mew sees the clones and the original Pokémon fighting in the arena, and it does not distinguish between them. It sees only suffering, only pain born from the illusion of separation. Mew refuses to use its full power, because to do so would be to accept Mewtwo's premise that the strongest deserves to decide who lives and who dies. Instead, Mew does something that confounds Mewtwo's entire worldview. It steps into the arena and stands among the clones. It lets itself be hit. It absorbs the attacks meant for others. And in that moment, it demonstrates that legitimacy is not a matter of origin, whether born from nature or from a test tube, but of compassion. Mewtwo watches this display and is forced to confront its own cynicism. The battle ends not with a victor, but with a reconsideration. Mewtwo begins to question the very ideals it had defended so violently. This rivalry is the beating heart of the Pokémon mythos. It is the tension between the world as it is and the world as we try to remake it. Mew's innocence is not weakness. It is a refusal to participate in a war that has no winners. Mewtwo's cynicism is not malice. It is a wound that has not yet healed. And the confrontation between them, that storm of psychic energy and unresolved anger, is really a mirror held up to ourselves, a question about whether we believe life has inherent worth, or whether worth must be earned through struggle. That question lingers, unresolved, as Mew fades back into the shadows of legend. But the story does not end there. Some secrets are not found in the open sky or in the heart of a jungle. Some secrets are hidden beneath a rusted truck, waiting for someone to look under the surface. That is where our journey leads next, to the forgotten corners of the game world, where a single unremarkable object holds a mystery that has never truly been solved. Chapter 17, The Truck Under the SS Anne. The philosophical clash between Mew's innocence and Mewtwo's cynicism culminates in a battle for biological legitimacy. But even as that confrontation echoes through the halls of Pokémon lore, another, quieter legend was taking root in the minds of millions. This legend had nothing to do with ancient temples or genetic engineering. It involved a truck. A single, seemingly insignificant truck parked on a dock in Vermilion City, just beside the SS Anne. And it is here, in the shadow of that ship, that we find ourselves wading into the most famous lie in 90s gaming history. You see, the myth of Mew under the truck is not merely a playground rumour. This is a case study in how children's imaginations, fueled by cryptic game design and a desperate hunger for the unobtainable, can transform a graphical glitch into a national obsession. The story goes like this. After the SS Anne departs, a truck appears on the dock. If you could only get the HM for strength, you could push that truck aside and find Mew hiding beneath it. Some versions claimed you needed the lava cookie from the old man on Single Island to persuade the hidden Pokémon to appear. Others insisted you had to first complete a specific sequence of events. Talking to every NPC, maybe missing the ship entirely, to unlock the encounter. But here's the truth. The truck is real. It exists in the game's code as a sprite, left behind perhaps as a remnant of a scrapped loading zone or a decorative piece. But Mew was never programmed to be there, not even as a data scrap. The Mew under the truck myth persisted despite being technically impossible, because it was supported by a perfect storm of factors. The game's inherent opacity, the power of peer reinforcement, and the fact that Mew itself was a genuine secret, albeit one buried in glitches and event distributions, not under a vehicle. Consider the mechanics of early Pokémon games. They didn't explain themselves. The mystery gift function, the event flags, the trainer IDs used for trades, all of it was invisible to the player. When a friend swore they saw Mew under the truck on a cousin's cartridge, that testimony carried weight, because the entire game felt like a locked box. You couldn't just look up the code on the schoolyard. The only proof was persistence. The cultural legacy of the lava cookie and strength rumors grew out of that same longing. The lava cookie, obtainable from the old man on Cinnabar Island, was a real item that restored a lot of HP. But why would a Pokémon that doesn't normally need healing respond to a cookie? The rumor proposed a logic. Mew is a mythical creature, so it requires a mythical offering. And strength, that was the key to moving obstacles. It all sounds plausible if you're 10 years old and you've never seen a line of assembly code, but there is a deeper reason this myth didn't die. It wasn't just about getting Mew, it was about the act of discovery itself. The truck was a detail that seemed out of place, a loose thread in an otherwise tightly woven world, and every child who played Red or Blue understood that loose threads sometimes led to the best hidden secrets, like the Missingno glitch, or the rare Pokédex entries that only appeared after performing impossible sequences. The truck became a symbol of the belief that the game was bigger than it appeared, that there was always one more secret waiting. Years later, when the internet confirmed the truth, the myth didn't vanish, it transformed. It became a shared memory, a badge of honor for those who once spent hours pushing against that truck with a borrowed Machoke, hoping to hear the chime of a legendary encounter. The myth was never about Mew. It was about the beauty of collective delusion, the way a simple lie can bind a generation of players together in wonder. As we drift away from the Vermilion dock, the truck fades into the background, but the itch remains. What other secrets might be hiding in the cracks of a cartridge built on near impossible constraints? The very same year those rumors spread, a different kind of glitch was being discovered. One that didn't rely on rumor, but on mathematics, on the fragile boundaries of the game's memory. Something that would eventually be called the glitch that defined a generation. And it all started with a single unassuming monster. You thought you knew every secret hidden in the code of Pokémon Red and Blue. The truck under the SS Anne was a lie, yes, but it was also a decoy, a false lead that kept the player base chasing shadows while the real phantom moved unnoticed through the very fabric of the game. That phantom was Mew, and it didn't need a truck, a glitch, or a rumor to exist. It needed something far more subtle, far more dangerous, a crack in the logic of the cartridge itself. The story of how Mew became accessible to a generation of trainers is not a story of discovery. It is a story of a fracture, a break in the careful architecture of the game's memory that allowed something from nowhere to appear somewhere it should never have been, and that somewhere was the tall grass of Route 24, right next to the Nugget Bridge. To understand the glitch that defined a generation, you have to first understand how the Game Boy managed its wandering trainers. Every trainer in the overworld, those sprites that lock eyes with you and force a battle, has a specific memory address assigned to them. When you defeat them, the game then flips a bit in that address, marking them as defeated so they never challenge you again. But here is the critical detail. The moment a trainer spots you, the game latches onto that trainer's unique identifier and begins a sequence of events. It checks the direction you're facing, calculates the distance, and then, if conditions are right, initiates a battle. Now, the original Japanese versions of Pokémon Red and Green had a bug. It was a tiny flaw in how the game handled the trainer sighting routine. When a trainer on the overworld saw you, the game would load their party data into a temporary area of memory called the RAM. But because of a quirk in the code, the game didn't properly reset that area after the battle ended. It left traces, fragments of the defeated trainer's data still floating in the same memory space the game used to load wild Pokémon encounters. Enter the long-range trainer glitch, also called the trainer fly glitch. This was the mechanism that turned a programming oversight into a legendary exploit. The glitch worked because of a specific trainer on Route 25, just north of Route 24. That trainer, a young boy with a Pokémon, stood at a fixed position near the end of the route, but due to the same memory corruption, if you moved just right, you could cause that trainer's sighting range to extend far beyond its intended boundaries. You could be standing all the way across Route 24, almost at the bridge, and the game would still think that distant trainer had locked eyes with you. That was the first step. The second step required precise movement. You had to approach a specific patch of grass on Route 24, while the game was still in the middle of its confused state, still trying to process the long-range sighting. You had to start a battle with a wild Pokémon, but also, at the exact moment the wild encounter triggered, you had to have the distant trainer's battle queued up in memory. The game would then merge those two events. You would see the wild Pokémon animation, but the battle would actually use the trainer's party and data. And inside that party data, if the trainer's team contained a Pokémon with a special stat of 21, the game would interpret that value as a species index. And species index number 151 was Mew. So you see, the glitch didn't summon Mew from some hidden subdirectory. It didn't unlock a secret flag. It simply confused the game's memory on a fundamental level. The game thought it was loading a wild encounter for a lowly Pidgey or Rattata. But because the memory still held the ghost of a defeated trainer's data, the species identifier got overwritten. And in that moment of confusion, the game's internal lookup table said, "This creature is Mew." Why did the Game Boy's memory allow this? Because the original cartridge was incredibly constrained. Every byte was precious. The programmers reused memory addresses for multiple purposes to save space. The same RAM that held the wild Pokémon encounter data was also used to hold the defeated trainer's party list. Under normal circumstances, the game would properly clear that memory after a trainer battle. But the long-range trigger happened so quickly, and the wild encounter overlapped so precisely, that the clearing routine never executed. The game simply proceeded with the corrupted data. The unintended consequences of Mew's presence on the game's stability were severe. Players who successfully performed the glitch often found that after catching Mew, their game behaved strangely. The Hall of Fame records might become scrambled. Certain items would duplicate or vanish. The game could freeze if you tried to view certain Pokémon in the Pokédex. Why? Because Mew was never intended to occupy that slot in a normal playthrough. Its data had no proper habitat in the game's internal database. It was a foreign object that, once captured, disrupted the delicate balance of the save file structure. Some players reported that their game would not save properly after catching Mew, or that the time played counter would reset to 0. But the most fascinating consequence was psychological. The glitch made Mew real for millions of players who had never seen it in an official event. It turned a technical bug into a shared cultural memory. Every kid who stayed up late with a Game Boy under the covers, following a meticulously typed guide to step onto the right tile at the exact right moment, was participating in a kind of digital ritual. They were exploiting a failure in the code, and in doing so, they were proving that even the rarest secrets could be forced into existence. Yet Mew had one more layer of mystery to offer. Because the glitch that worked on Route 24 was not the only way to meet the elusive Pokémon. There was another method, one that didn't involve any trainers at all. It took advantage of the game's internal handling of maps and transitions, a trick that would allow a player to cross boundaries that didn't exist, to stand in spaces between spaces. That method which became known as the Mirage Pokémon, is the story we'll save for another night. But remember, the crack in the code was never sealed. It only grew wider until the entire foundation of what you thought was possible in a Pokémon game began to shift under your feet. The glitch that allowed you to capture Mew on Route 24 was more than just a trick of the game's programming. It was a crack in the wall between the world and the hidden data that runs beneath it. That crack revealed something profound. Mew is not just a creature of biology and ancestry, but also a creature of information. And information, as we have learned from the darkest corners of Pokémon lore, can be manipulated, copied, and even weaponized. What if Mew's genetic code is not the only blueprint for creation? What if its essence, the very soul of the ancestor, could be digitized, stored, and replicated in a way that surpasses flesh and blood? This is where the story takes a turn into the unsettling territory of the Mirage Pokémon. Deep within the archives of the Pokémon universe, there exists a technology that attempts the impossible. To capture the soul of Mew as pure data, this is the project of Dr. Young, a scientist whose ambition rivaled even those who created Mewtwo. But unlike the biological cloning that gave rise to Mewtwo, Dr. Young's approach was different, more terrifying, as it sought to erase the line between the living and the simulated. Dr. Young believed that Mew's true power lay not in its DNA, but in its information. He theorized that if Mew is the genetic ancestor of all Pokémon, then its genetic code is essentially a perfect compression of every possible Pokémon dataset. If you could digitize that code, you could recreate any Pokémon, any form, any power, without the limitations of organic life. You could create a Mew that never tires, never ages, never feels. A Mew that is nothing more than a perfect, hollow copy. But to achieve this, Dr. Young needed access to the real Mew, not just its DNA, but its soul. His research notes, recovered from a forgotten laboratory in the Ore region, describe an attempt to scan Mew with a device that could read the quantum state of its consciousness. The device was called the Mirage System. It was designed to capture the essence of a Pokémon and convert it into a fully interactive holographic form, a Mirage Pokémon. The terrifying potential of this Mirage technology was never fully realized in Dr. Young's time, but fragments of his work survived. In the games, you may recall the existence of the Mirage Pokémon in Pokémon X-Day, Gale of Darkness, artificial Pokémon created from shadow data. Dr. Young's experiments were the prototype. He wanted to go further. He wanted to digitize the ancestor itself. What made his attempt so chilling was the difference between a biological Mew and a data-driven facsimile. A biological Mew is unpredictable. It transforms, hides, laughs, and plays. It has a will, a spark that cannot be reproduced. A digitized Mew, a Mirage Mew, would be perfect and obedient. It would have no soul, and yet it would look exactly like the original. It would speak in its voice, move with its grace, and even mimic its emotions. But underneath, there would be nothing, just code. Dr. Young's ultimate failure, or perhaps his victory, lay in the fact that Mew itself seemed to resist the digitization. According to recovered audio logs from the experiment, the Mirage system began to malfunction the moment it attempted to lock onto Mew's consciousness. The readings fluctuated wildly. At one point, the laboratory's monitors displayed a single phrase in ancient script: "The one who watches from the tree." The experiment was abandoned, but the data remained, and that data, incomplete, corrupted, hybridized, gave birth to something else. Something that still drifts in the digital shadows of the Pokémon world. A mirage that is not quite alive, not quite dead. A silent guardian that waits for someone to call it. What that guardian protects, and why it never sleeps, is a story for another time. But when you next encounter a mysterious Mew, one that seems too perfect, too still, too silent, ask yourself, is it the original, or is it a ghost in the machine? The answer may be hidden in the next chapter. The Silent Guardian. I hope you're as amazed by this as I am. If you want to stay updated on more content like this, make sure to subscribe and join our community of curious minds. Trust me, what's coming next will challenge everything you thought you knew. And so, after exploring the terrifying potential of Mirage Data and Dr. Young's attempt to digitize the soul of the ancestor, we return to the living myth itself. For all the efforts to recreate Mew artificially, the real one remains elusive, silent, and almost impossibly distant. But distance does not mean absence. If you look closely at the history of the Pokémon world, you begin to see patterns, catastrophes averted at the last moment, heroes guided by invisible hands, and always a faint pink shimmer on the edge of perception. Consider the first of the great disasters, the ancient civilization that built the ultimate weapon, the war that threatened to erase all life from the land. In the annals of Pokémon lore, we are told that a single Pokémon of incredible power stopped the conflict, sealed the weapon, and vanished into legend. Most assume that was Mewtwo, or perhaps a legendary from the creation trio, but the timeline does not match. Mewtwo had not yet been born. The creation trio remained in their dimensional prisons. No, the being that intervened that day was smaller, softer, and older than any of them. It was Mew. The records are fragmentary, gleaned from murals in the desert ruins and the seafloor cavern. They depict a tiny figure floating above a battlefield, radiating a gentle pink light. The warriors on both sides lowered their arms. The weapon's core cooled, and then the figure disappeared, leaving only a melody in the wind. That melody, you may recall, is the same song that ancient people sang to honor Mew, the song that appears once a year at sunrise. The intervention was not a display of force, it was a display of presence. Mew did not fight. It simply reminded everyone that they were connected, that all life comes from the same source, and that reminder was enough. Now fast forward to the modern era. The incident at Mount Quaina, the rampaging beast that threatened to destroy an entire region. You might think that was a job for the legendary birds, or for Ho-Oh, or for some powerful trainer. But if you look at the archival footage from the anime, the original series, not the movies, you will see something curious. In the background of a single frame, just as the beast unleashes its final attack, a small pink shape darts across the sky. It is there for less than a second. Most viewers dismiss it as a smear on the film, but those who know what to look for understand. Mew was there. It did not stop the beast. It redirected the attack. It nudged the beast's aim just slightly, so that the blast struck empty ground instead of a nearby village, and then it vanished, leaving no trace. This is the pattern. Over and over, in the anime and in the movies, Mew intervenes at critical moments, but always from the shadows. The eruption of the volcano near the Orange Islands, the sudden calm that allowed the rescue team to escape, the collapse of the Team Rocket headquarters in the Kanto region, the mysterious power outage that gave Ash and his friends time to escape, the final battle of the Hoenn crisis, the inexplicable shift in the weather that allowed the legendary golems to be awakened at exactly the right moment. Every time, you can find a hint of Mew's presence if you look hard enough. But why? Why would a being of such power choose to remain hidden, to act only in whispers? The answer lies in the theory that Mew guides the protagonist's journey through the shadows. Ash Ketchum, the chosen one of prophecy, has always been accompanied by a mysterious force. Many attribute it to luck, or to the bond with his Pokémon, or to the will of the universe itself. But consider the coincidences. Ash meets a rare Pokémon exactly when he needs it. He learns a crucial lesson just before a battle. He receives a mysterious gift from a stranger who disappears before he can thank them. Is it coincidence, or is it Mew, shaping the path without ever revealing itself? The most compelling evidence comes from the movies. In the first Mewtwo film, Mew does not fight, it plays, it dances. It challenges Mewtwo's wrath, not with power, but with joy. And when the battle is over, Mew vanishes, leaving Ash to take the credit. In the later movie where Mew appears in the past, it does not alter history, it simply watches, and occasionally nudges a leaf or a stone. It is the ultimate passive guide. It does not lead, it influences. It does not command, it suggests. And the protagonist, whether Ash or some other follows the path without realizing they are being guided. Why does Mew choose to remain a myth rather than a leader of Pokémon? The answer is both simple and profound. Leadership implies dominance. It implies hierarchy. Mew understands that the very concept of a leader creates followers, and followers create inequality. Mew's role is not to rule, but to remind. It is the genetic ancestor, the source code, not the operating system. If it stepped forward and declared itself king, it would shatter the delicate balance of trust and independence that allows Pokémon to grow alongside humans. It would become a god, and gods demand worship. Mew does not want worship, it wants connection. So Mew remains invisible. It watches from the trees, from the depths of the ocean, from the sky that humans rarely look at. It sings the ancient song at sunrise, but only for those who listen with their hearts, not their ears. It intervenes in catastrophes, but only to nudge, never to command. And it guides the protagonist, but never in a way that takes away free will. This is the silent guardian, the being that holds the entire world together without anyone knowing. But what happens when the guardian is forced to choose? When the very fabric of life is threatened, and a nudge is no longer enough? The answer lies in a story that has not yet been told. A story about a genetic dead end, where the source code itself must face its own limitations. Up next is Chapter 21, The Genetic Dead End. But even as Mew watches over the world, a shadow falls across its own existence. The very thing that makes it the origin, its complete genetic code, the blueprint for every Pokémon that has ever lived or will live, may also be its undoing. You see, to be the genetic ancestor of all life is to carry an immense burden, one that no other creature has ever had to bear. Mew's DNA is not just a library of possibilities, it is a living, breathing record of every adaptation, every mutation, every evolutionary path that has ever been taken, and that record is beginning to fray. The dark side of being the origin is that there is no backup, no second copy, no other creature that shares Mew's exact genetic signature. Mew is, for all intents and purposes, a species of one, and when a species consists of a single individual, extinction is not a distant possibility. It is a constant whispering threat. Scientists who have studied the few samples of Mew's DNA ever obtained have noted something alarming. The strands are not stable, they are hyperactive, constantly rearranging, rewriting themselves, as if the code itself is trying to remember something it has forgotten. But memory, when it comes to genetics, can be a curse. What if Mew's DNA is becoming unstable? Not from age, not from disease, but from the sheer weight of containing every other Pokémon's genetic information within one tiny, delicate frame. Think of it like a computer program that has been patched so many times that the original source code is barely recognizable. Errors creep in, sequences repeat. Parts of the code start to overwrite each other. In the Pokémon world, that translates to something far more terrifying than a software bug. It means Mew's own body could begin to fail, its cells unable to decide what they are supposed to be. A creature that can transform into anything might, one day, transform into nothing at all. And then there is the matter of Team Rocket. Their theft of Mew's DNA decades ago was not just a crime, it was a violation of the very fabric of Pokémon existence. When they extracted those samples, they did not just take a few cells. They tore away pieces of the Origin's genetic memory, and in doing so, they may have permanently altered Mew's lineage. The DNA that was stolen was used to create Mewtwo. Yes, but that creation came at a cost. Every time a strand of Mew's code was copied, replicated, forced into a new host, something was lost. The original became less whole. Imagine a book that is the only copy of all knowledge, and someone comes along and rips out pages to photocopy them. The original pages are still there, but the binding weakens, the ink fades, the story changes. Team Rocket's scientists were not careful, they were cruel. They spliced, forced and mutated Mew's DNA without understanding what they were doing. They created a creature of immense power, but in doing so, they left a scar on the genetic source. Some researchers believe that Mew is now unable to reproduce naturally. not because it is a mythical Pokémon, but because the theft of its DNA disrupted the very mechanism that would allow it to pass on its legacy. The threat of extinction for a creature that is one of a kind has never been more real. No eggs, no offspring, no genetic continuation. If Mew dies, the origin dies with it. And yet Mew does not seem to fight. It does not rage against the scientists who stole from it, nor does it seek revenge. Instead, it fades further into the background, becoming more invisible, more silent. Some theorize that Mew knows its time is limited, and that it has accepted its role as a dying ancestor. Others believe that the instability in its DNA is the reason it has become so reclusive, because every transformation, every use of its power, could be the one that triggers a catastrophic breakdown. In a sense, Mew is walking a tightrope over an abyss, and the rope is fraying with every step. But there is another possibility, one that is both hopeful and deeply unsettling. What if Mew's instability is not a flaw, but a feature? What if the origin is designed to eventually dissolve its own genetic code, releasing it back into the world as raw, unformed Pokémon energy? That would mean Mew's death is not an extinction, but a rebirth, a final selfless act that seeds new life across the planet. Yet that would also mean that every Mew we have ever seen is already a ghost, a temporary vessel for a legacy that was never meant to last forever. The question lingers in the dark. Will Mew simply vanish one day, leaving behind only the fragments of its DNA scattered in laboratories and in the bodies of its clone? Or will it find a way to salvage its own existence? Perhaps by using its incredible powers to rewrite its own code? No one knows. But what we do know is that Mew's story is far from over, and the next chapter may involve an object that holds a secret even more unexpected than the glitches of Route 24, a mysterious sphere associated with a trainer's journey that might just contain the key to reaching the unreachable. But that is a mystery for another time, one that begins with a Pokéball that holds more than just a creature of light. We left off in a place of quiet dread, watching a creature that was never meant to exist in the first place slowly unravel at the molecular level. The origin of all Pokémon, the genetic wellspring from which every species ostensibly flows, might itself be facing an internal extinction. But before that extinction becomes a reality, we have witnessed something stranger. The commercial entombment of a god, the Pokéball Plus, a controller, a toy, a plastic sphere that lights up and rumbles in your palm, the same shape as the devices we've used to capture creatures for over 20 years. And inside that ball, in the late 2010s, a very specific piece of data was sealed. Mew, not a glitch, not a mythical find in the jungles of Guyana, not a reward for 100 hours of dedicated play. No, Mew was locked inside a product you had to buy. If you purchased the Pokéball Plus, a peripheral that cost roughly the same as a full game, you received a code, one Mew, one per device. No in-game puzzle, no mysterious truck, no Professor Oak asking you to deliver a parcel with a hidden secret. Just a transaction, a transfer of digital ownership for a physical price. The shift was seismic, even though few acknowledged it at the time. For decades, Mew had been the ultimate symbol of rarity, of discovery that felt earned through luck, persistence, or myth. The truck under the SS Anne, the glitch in the tall grass of Route 24, the whispered legend of a Pokémon that only appeared if you believed. And then in 2018, Nintendo and the Pokémon Company released the Pokéball Plus for Pokémon Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee, and inside that ball was Mew. No battle, no rival player who traded you a rare event, no hidden cave, just a purchase confirmation email. Think about the lore implications. What does it mean for the genetic ancestor of all Pokémon to be shrink-wrapped and sold as a retail bonus? The ancient peoples who composed a song in Mew's honor, who believed it appeared only once a year at sunrise. They never imagined it could be summoned by a $40 purchase on Amazon. The scientific hubris that created Mewtwo, the attempt to surpass nature, pales in comparison to this, the commodification of origin itself. Mew is no longer a creature to be found. It is a product to be acquired. The shift from discovery in the wild to acquisition via hardware is complete. You do not hunt Mew. You do not earn Mew. You buy the ball, you receive the code, you own a piece of the primordial past. But at what cost to the story? There is a chilling parallel here to the very genetic instability we discussed. If Mew's DNA is fraying, if the origin point is becoming a dead end, then perhaps its containment within a physical device is not a celebration but a symptom. A creature that once roamed the jungles of South America, that split itself into multiple copies before the eyes of awestruck trainers, is now reduced to a string of ones and zeros inside a peripheral. It will one day stop being manufactured, stop being supported, stop being compatible with future consoles. What happens to Mew when the Pokeball Plus battery dies? What happens to the ancestor when the servers that distribute its code eventually go dark? The answer is a silence deeper than any jungle. The marketing language at the time was cheerful. Bring a Mew with you on your adventure. The advertisement showed children holding the ball, their faces lit with joy. But the reality is that Mew, the being that taught Mewtwo about the fragility of life, the silent guardian who intervened in global catastrophes, the creature that can turn invisible and reshape its biology at will, was now a captive of commerce. You cannot catch Mew in the wild, in any modern Pokémon game outside of specific transfer methods. The only way to obtain it in Sword and Shield, for instance, was to claim it from a mystery gift. And for many players, that meant owning a Pokeball Plus. The wild is gone. The mystery is gone. The hunt is replaced by a shopping cart. This is the modern commercialization of Mew, and it represents a pay-to-play accessibility that fundamentally alters the creature's role in the mythos. Mew is no longer the hidden truth, waiting at the end of a glitch or a rumor. It is a premium bonus item. You pay, you receive. The exclusivity once born of programming limitations and developer secrecy is now born of price tags, and yet there is a deeper strangeness. The Pokeball Plus itself was designed to mimic the feeling of a real Pokeball, complete with vibration and lights. In a way, it is the closest we have ever come to physically holding a Pokémon, and the first Pokémon to be held in that manner was the one that was never meant to be caught. The lore implications of Mew being contained in a physical device are almost theological. You are not just storing data, you are holding the ancestor in your palm, inside a toy that looks like a miniature prison. The very act of catching a mythical being becomes a transaction, a transfer of power from the digital ether to your wallet. But here is where the mystery deepens. If Mew is inside the Pokeball Plus, and the Pokeball Plus can only contain one creature at a time, then what happens when you transfer it out? The ball goes empty. But does it stay empty? Or does the ball retain a ghost of Mew's presence? Some players reported that after moving Mew to Pokémon Home, the ball would still randomly light up, as if the peripheral retained a memory of the Pokémon it once held, a flicker of residual consciousness, a digital phantom limb. And this is where the story takes a turn even darker, because there is another Mew out there, a different kind of Mew. One that was never meant to be obtained through any store or any ball, a Mew that exists only as a shade of probability, a glitch in the code of reality itself. And in the next chapter, we will hunt for that Mew. We will follow the trail of a creature that is not red, not pink, not the one you paid for. We will pursue the shiny Mew, and in doing so, we may discover that the most elusive form of the origin might not be found in a ball at all. We ended the last chapter with Mew contained inside a Pokeball Plus, a physical vessel you could hold in your hand. A strange irony, isn't it? The genetic ancestor of all Pokémon, the creature that can turn invisible, that can split its consciousness across multiple forms, reduced to a commercial toy. But there is another kind of hunt, one that has nothing to do with store shelves or pre-order bonuses. This hunt is for a ghost that by all rights should not exist, the shiny Mew, or as some collectors call it, the blue Mew. Over the years, countless trainers have scoured the code of Pokémon Emerald, searching for a way to encounter a Mew that shimmers with a pale cerulean sheen instead of its usual pink, and they have found something. But it is not a simple encounter. It is a relic of a forgotten event, a window into Nintendo's most exclusive distribution history. To understand why this particular variant is so coveted, we have to travel back to the year 2005, when Pokémon Emerald was released, and a single legendary journey was offered to a lucky few. That journey was called the Old Sea Map event. In the game's code, there is a map item, just one, that unlocks a tiny island in the middle of the ocean, far beyond the usual Hoenn routes. That island is called Faraway Island, and on it at level 30, a single Mew waits. Not a shiny, not by default, but the item itself, the Old Sea Map, was never officially distributed in most regions, only in Japan, and only during a limited time window at Pokémon centers in the summer of 2005. If you wanted to get that map legitimately, you had to physically bring your Game Boy Advance to a participating store and have it downloaded via a special cart or infrared device. No mystery gifts, no internet code, just you, your cartridge, and a store clerk who pressed a button. Now, here is where the hunt becomes a legend. The shiny Mew from Faraway Island is not guaranteed. It requires the same grueling process as any other shiny encounter, soft resetting, hundreds or thousands of times, hoping that the game's random number generator spits out a specific combination of values that produce a blue Mew instead of a pink one. But there is a catch. The Old Sea Map event itself is so rare that only a few thousand copies of the distribution were ever made. Many of those cartridges have since been lost, or the battery has died, or the save file was overwritten. Today, a legitimate, untouched copy of Pokémon Emerald that still has the Old Sea Map on it is worth thousands of dollars, and a shiny Mew caught from that event is worth even more. In the tens of thousands, sometimes more than $100,000 in private sales. Why? Because there is no other way to get a shiny Mew in the modern era without resorting to hacking or glitches. Almost every distribution of Mew in later generations, the ones from the Pokeball Plus, from Sword and Shield, from events in the 2000 teens, has been shiny locked. That means the game will never produce a shiny version of Mew from those official distributions. The only exceptions are the Faraway Island event and a few Japanese Pokémon Ranch distributions from 2008, where a random Mew could appear shiny, but those distributions are also long gone. So the blue Mew has become a holy grail for collectors, a testament to a time when obtaining a mythical Pokémon required more than just an internet connection. But let's step back for a moment and think about what the blue coloration actually means from a lore perspective. Mew's original design was a single solid color because of memory constraints. The Game Boy could not render complex shading, but the shiny variant is blue, a shift from pink to cyan. In the real world, blue skin or fur in animals is often a sign of a genetic anomaly, a lack of melanin, or a structural color effect. Is it possible that the blue Mew is not just a palette swap, but a sign of something deeper? Could this color change hint at a genetic recession in the ancestor itself? After all, Mew contains the DNA of every Pokémon. What if a slight mutation in its own code could produce a different form? One that might represent an incomplete replication, a step backward, or perhaps the opposite, an ascension, a more pure, more ancient state of being, before the pink hue developed as a side effect of evolution. We know from the mansion logs that Mew was found in Guyana, deep in the jungle. The color pink might be a sign of its wild, natural state, but blue is the color of the sky, of deep water, of the unknown. In many cultures, blue is associated with the divine, with the heavens. Maybe the shiny Mew is not a flock copy, but a glimpse of Mew as it was when it first emerged from the primordial soup, before it acquired the more familiar rose tint. Perhaps the blue coloration is a visual echo of the original genetic blueprint, a recessive trait that only appears in one of every 4,000 encounters. But for those who hunt it today, the lore takes a back seat to the sheer difficulty of the pursuit, because even if you have a copy of Pokémon Emerald, and a way to inject the old C map into the game, a process that itself borders on illegitimacy. You still face the random number generator, and the Emerald RNG is notoriously fickle. It does not behave like the later games. You have to learn to calibrate your timing, to hit a specific frame, or you will never see the blue. Some hunters spend weeks, months, years. They develop spreadsheets, they write scripts, they study the game's internal clock, and in the end, they might never catch it. That is the dark side of the shiny Mew hunt. It is a reminder that some secrets are meant to stay buried. The old sea map, the island, the blue Mew. All of it is a fragment of a past that Nintendo has locked away. You can try to access it, but you will be fighting against the very architecture of the game, against memory limitations and distribution records that no longer exist. It is a hunt that requires not just patience, but a kind of faith. Faith that the shimmering blue still exists somewhere in a dusty cartridge, on a forgotten island, in a game that was never meant to be played forever. So when you see a blue Mew in a trade or a screenshot, know that it represents something more than a color swap. It represents a journey that most players will never complete. A journey that asks the question, how far would you go to obtain the origin? And what does it say about us as trainers, that we are willing to spend months of our lives hunting a ghost? That is the mystery we will explore in the next chapter, as we look beyond the game world and into the larger structure of reality itself. The idea that Mew might not just exist in one timeline, but in every timeline at once. That is the heart of Chapter 24, the multiverse theory. Last chapter, we chased the ghost of a blue Mew across the shimmering waters of Faraway Island, a pilgrimage that required a ticket most players will never hold. We learned that even when you finally encounter that mythical creature, it's only a single, fleeting moment, a brief dance with a phantom that will vanish again into the ether. And that's precisely where the mystery deepens, because that vanishing act isn't just a quirk of one game. It is the thread that binds every version of Mew across every possible timeline. Consider this, the Mew you might have encountered in your copy of Pokémon Red or Blue. The one that couldn't be obtained without a developer's secret, a toy or a handshake from a Nintendo representative. That creature feels like a rumor, a story passed between schoolyards, a myth that never quite solidifies. But that same sense of being just out of reach applies to the Mew in the anime, the Mew in the movies, and perhaps most strikingly, the Mew in the pages of the Pokémon Adventures manga. They are not the same character. Not exactly, yet they share a single haunting identity. They are all phantoms. In the games, Mew is a data ghost. It exists in the code, but it is deliberately locked away. No wild encounter, no hidden cave, no safari zone. Its presence is felt only through the legends, scratched into the walls of the Pokémon Mansion on Cinnabar Island. Diary entries that describe a creature discovered in the jungles of Guyana. A creature so powerful and so fragile that it was named and then hidden. The games never let you truly possess Mew. They only ever let you borrow it, through events that come and go like whispers. This phantom status is built into its very programming, even in the modern era, when you can bring Mew from Pokémon Go into Let's Go, or from the Pokéball Plus into Sword and Shield, you are still moving a ghost between vessels. It never feels like a permanent capture. Then there is the anime. Here Mew appears as a benevolent, almost ethereal guardian. It shows itself to Ash and his friends only when the fate of the world hangs in the balance. A silent figure slipping through time and space, hovering over ancient temples, or appearing at the edge of a glacier. It rarely speaks. It rarely stays. In the first movie, Mewtwo strikes back. Mew is the gentle counterpart to Mewtwo's rage, but even then it does not linger. After the battle ends, it vanishes into the storm. In later appearances, like the Lucario movie or the Hooper movie, Mew flits in and out of the story like a firefly, appearing just long enough to tip the scales and then disappearing again. The anime reinforces the idea that Mew is not a Pokémon to be owned, but a phenomenon to be witnessed. But the most jarring, most primal version of Mew awaits in the Pokémon Adventures manga. And if you thought the game Mew was elusive, or the anime Mew was aloof, you are not prepared for what the manga unleashed. In the pages of Pokémon Adventures, Mew is feral. It is not a playful pink cat that giggles and floats. It is a wild creature of the jungle, unpredictable and violent. The manga's Mew is first encountered by Red and Blue during their journey through the Pokémon Mansion. But unlike the games, here the encounter is a battle for survival. Mew does not wait politely to be caught. It attacks. It transforms into other Pokémon mid-combat, not for show, but to tear its enemies apart. It uses psychic powers not to communicate, but to lift and throw trainers across the room. There is no gentle song at sunrise, only a raw, untamed force of nature that lashes out at anything that gets too close. This Mew is captured, eventually, by Team Rocket. They trap it in a containment sphere and use it as the template for Mewtwo. But even in captivity, the manga's Mew never loses its wild edge. It fights the chains. It bares its teeth. It is a trapped animal, not a sacred symbol. And perhaps that is the most honest portrayal of what it means to be the ancestor of all Pokémon. Because an ancestor should not be tame. An ancestor should be something you fear and revere. Something that predates civilization and will outlast it. And yet, despite these vast differences, the game's programmed ghosts, the anime's serene guide, the manga's feral predator, they all share the same phantom quality. In every timeline, Mew cannot be held. In every story, it escapes. In the games, even if you receive the event distribution, the Mew you get is still a digital gift, not a creature you hunted. The moment you put it in the PC, it is as good as gone. In the anime, Mew never stays with the main cast. It never becomes a permanent companion. And in the manga, after the Team Rocket arc, Mew simply disappears from the narrative. It is never seen again. Each timeline leaves a hole where Mew used to be. Think about what that means for the structure of the Pokémon universe. If Mew is the origin, the starting point, the genetic blueprint for every species, then its phantom nature suggests that origins themselves are elusive. You can never stand at the beginning of a river and say, "This is where it all started." Because the source is always hidden in the mist. Mew is that mist. It is the gap in our understanding, the place where evolution becomes myth. So we are left with a multiverse of Mews, each one a different shade of the same ghost. But the one question that never changes is this. If Mew is the template, then what does it mean to create a copy? What happens when science tries to pin down a phantom? The story of Mewtwo is not just about a clone. It is about the hubris of believing you can bottle a ghost. And that story of scientific hubris is only one step away from where we are now. Because if Mew is a phantom that appears and disappears across all timelines, then Mewtwo is the result of someone trying to make that phantom stay forever. The consequences of that attempt are darker than Mew's own shadow. Soon, we will see just how far that arrogance reached. The previous chapter explored how Mew exists across countless timelines, each version a ghost in the machine of reality. A feral Mew in the manga, a silent guide in the anime, a primordial ancestor in the games. But in every timeline, one event casts a long shadow, one moment of scientific overreach that forever changed a world. And the man at the heart of that moment, Mr. Fuji, spent the rest of his life trying to undo what he had helped set in motion. Mr. Fuji's story begins with wonder, not hubris. When he first laid eyes on Mew in the depths of the Guyana jungle, he saw a miracle, a creature that held the genetic blueprint of every Pokémon that had ever lived or would ever live. Its DNA was a living library, a record of evolution stretching back to the very dawn of life on this planet. And Mr. Fuji, a scientist driven by curiosity and the promise of discovery, wanted to study it. He didn't want to destroy it, he wanted to understand it. But understanding can be a dangerous appetite. He extracted a small sample of Mew's genetic material, believing it would unlock the secrets of Pokémon origins, perhaps even allow him to recreate the ancient ancestors of modern species. The sample was stored in the Pokémon Mansion on Cinnabar Island, a state-of-the-art laboratory where Mr. Fuji worked alongside other researchers, but before his research could mature, Team Rocket infiltrated the facility. They stole the DNA sample, and with it, they began a project that would violate every ethical boundary science had ever known. They wanted to create the ultimate Pokémon. They wanted to play God and Mr. Fuji, whether through coercion or misplaced hope, found himself drawn into the project. He became the lead scientist on the Mewtwo initiative. For months, he watched as the clone grew inside a nutrient tank, its body forming from Mew's stolen code, its mind twisted by human ambition. He saw the creature's eyes open for the first time, not with the gentle curiosity of Mew, but with a raw, untamed fury. They had not created a being of peace. They had created a weapon, a living engine of destruction that could read minds and bend the fabric of reality. Mr. Fuji's regret began to crystallize the moment Mewtwo broke free from its restraints. The clone demolished the laboratory, killing several researchers, and fled into the world. The newspapers called it a disaster. The League buried the incident, but Mr. Fuji never recovered. He abandoned the Pokémon mansion, left his life of science behind, and retreated to a small house in Lavender Town. There, he adopted a new identity, not the brilliant geneticist, but the humble elder who cared for orphaned Pokémon and tended to the graves of the dead. He became the caretaker of the Pokémon Tower, a silent penance for the lives lost because of his involvement. He spent his days comforting trainers who had lost their partners, offering wisdom he had learned the hardest way. He never spoke of Mewtwo. He never mentioned the project, but the weight of that sin was etched into the lines of his face, the tremor in his hands, the way he would sometimes look at the sky with a haunted expression. The cost of trying to play God with the DNA of a mythical being is not just the creation of a monster, it is the destruction of the creator's own soul. Mr. Fuji became a ghost himself, a man defined by what he had done, not by who he had been. He tried to atone by building a home for the forgotten, a sanctuary for the abandoned, but the permanent scar left on the Pokémon world by the Mewtwo project could never be fully healed. That scar is Mewtwo itself, a living embodiment of human arrogance. It is a creature that exists in constant pain, torn between its own existence as a cloned being and the memory of the original Mew that it can never truly become. Mewtwo's rage, its isolation, its desperate search for meaning, all of it traces back to that moment in the Cinnabar laboratory when Mr. Fuji looked at a test tube and saw a solution, a breakthrough, a triumph of science. He never saw the wound he was opening in the world. Today, the Pokémon mansion stands abandoned, its walls crumbling, its secrets buried under decades of neglect, but the journals remain. In them, Mr. Fuji's handwriting becomes more erratic with each entry. He obsesses over the ethics of his work, the guilt that gnaws at his waking hours. He wonders if there is any way to reverse what he has done, and in the final entries, he writes about a dream of a peaceful being, a symbol of wonder, something pure enough to remind the world that not all of Mew's legacy is darkness. That dream, perhaps, is what lingers in the quiet corners of the Pokémon world, waiting to be understood. And in the next chapter, we will explore that dream more closely, to see what shape it takes, and whether it can ever be realized. After Mr. Fuji turned away from the shattered remnants of his ambition, he didn't just walk into a life of quiet atonement. He walked into a legend of his own, becoming the Elder of Cinnabar Island, a keeper of secrets, not a creator of them, but the creature he helped drag into the light, the one whose DNA was stolen and weaponized, never faded from the world's imagination. In fact, Mew only grew more enigmatic with each passing generation. Think about the sheer volume of new Pokémon introduced since the original 151. Hundreds of legendaries have arrived. Divine dragons that control time and space, elemental titans that shape continents, and beings born from human emotion. Yet, when you ask someone, even a casual fan, to name the Pokémon that embodies mystery, more often than not, they say Mew, not Arceus, not Dialga, not Rayquaza, Mew. Why? What makes a single, small, pink, psychic-type creature remain the universal symbol of wonder when the franchise now has an entire pantheon of literal gods. It comes down to a fundamental distinction that the Pokémon world has never fully resolved: the difference between a god and an ancestor. Arceus is the god Pokémon, the creator of the universe according to its myth. Arceus is a being of pure theology, an entity that exists outside of biology, outside of evolution, outside of life as we understand it. Arceus simply is a first cause, a prime mover, a divine spark that set the cosmos in motion. But Mew is different. Mew is not a creator. Mew is a source, a biological wellspring from which all other Pokémon life may have flowed. This is the biological versus theological origin debate that quietly divides Pokémon lore. Are Pokémon the descendants of a common genetic ancestor, a primordial life form whose DNA still echoes in every species? Or are they the grand inventions of a divine architect, each species a unique creation shaped by the hand of a god? Mew represents the first answer, Arceus represents the second, and the franchise has never officially chosen between them. It keeps both possibilities alive, layered in a way that doesn't contradict, but instead enriches the mystery. You can hold both truths in your hands. Mew as the evolutionary root of all creatures, and Arceus as the cosmic author of all existence. Which one is real? The games don't say. They simply present the evidence and let you draw your own conclusion. That there's a deeper reason Mew remains the face of mystery. It's not just a question of origin, it's a question of access. Every legendary Pokémon that came after Mew has been given a story. They appear in climactic battles. They have dedicated movies. They have temples, artifacts, rituals. You can read their lore in a dozen different media. You can track their movements through the plot. But Mew has none of that. Mew has a tiny island in the middle of nowhere, accessible only through a glitch or an event long since expired. Mew has a single song that ancient people sang once a year at sunrise. Mew makes fleeting appearances, rarely stays long, and never explains itself. There is no grand narrative for Mew, there is only suggestion. That emptiness, that deliberate gap, is what keeps the wonder alive. When you encounter Mew, you aren't meeting a character in a story. You are meeting a piece of the world that exists outside the story. It feels like a discovery, not a plot point, and discovery is the root of all mystery. Contrast that with Arceus. You can battle Arceus in the Hall of Origin. You can catch it, train it, use it in battle. It has stats, a type, a move pool. It's a god you can fit in a Pokeball. And once you've done that, the awe dims. The theology becomes mechanical. But Mew has always resisted that reduction. Even when you do catch it, through an event or a Pokeball Plus, it never feels like possession. It feels like a temporary arrangement. Mew still retains its distance. The biological origin debate also adds a layer of unease. If Mew is the ancestor, then every Pokémon carries a fragment of its DNA. In a very real sense, Mew is inside every creature you have ever loved. That's not just a lore fact, it's an emotional truth that makes Mew a hidden constant, a presence that has always been there, unseen but integral. A god can be absent, a god can create and then withdraw, but an ancestor never leaves. An ancestor lives on in every child, and that is why, no matter how many new legendaries appear, Mew remains the face of mystery. Because Mew is not a mystery that can be solved. It's a mystery that can only be felt. It's the question you never fully answer. It's the reason you keep searching. So where does that leave us? The Elder of Cinnabar understood. He tried to do science to wonder, and he lost everything. The world learned nothing from his mistake. But somewhere, in the jungle of Guyana, in a place that no map charts, in a moment that no camera has ever captured, Mew still drifts through the morning mist, waiting, listening, wondering. And soon we will take one last look into the abyss of that mystery. The final expedition is coming, and what we find there might change everything we thought we knew. In the previous chapter, we sat with the contrast between the god Pokémon Arceus and the ancestor Mew. One, a creator of universes, the other a humble pink genetic blueprint. But if Mew truly is the ancestor of all Pokémon, then modern science in the Pokémon world has only just begun to peel back the layers of that claim. Today, the laboratories of Sylph Co., the Devon Corporation, and even the secret archives of the Pokémon League are asking a question that would have seemed impossible 20 years ago. What if Mew is not the end of the story? What if Mew is only the beginning of a much longer, much stranger cycle? You see, for decades, the scientific consensus was simple. Mew contains the DNA of every known Pokémon species. That single fact made it the holy grail of genetics, a living Rosetta Stone for the entire Pokémon kingdom. But recent breakthroughs in the Pokémon world's understanding of gene expression, ancient fossil reconstruction, and even dimensional resonance have begun to complicate that picture. Researchers studying the DNA of Mew in the modern era have discovered something remarkable. The code inside Mew isn't just a static archive of past forms, it's a living, evolving map. Certain sequences appear to be blank, waiting to be filled by environmental triggers, almost as if Mew is not just an ancestor, but a perpetual prototype, a vessel that can adapt to any ecological niche that might arise. This challenges the very notion of an original Pokémon. If Mew's DNA is not fixed, then what does it mean to call it the ancestor? Perhaps Mew is more like a seed bank, containing the potential for all life, rather than the actual progenitor of every species. And that potential raises a thrilling and terrifying possibility. There may be other, older seeds buried in the earth, waiting to be found. Thus begins the ongoing search for more Mew-like ancestors in other regions. It is no longer just a hunt for a mythical pink cat in the jungles of Guyana. It is a global paleontological and genetic expedition. In the Hoenn region, scientists have unearthed fossilized traces of a primordial Pokémon that predates even the first written records. A creature with a genetic signature hauntingly similar to Mew's, yet distinct. Some whisper of a lost temple beneath the waters of the Seafoam Islands, where a mural depicts a being of pure light, splitting into many shapes. In the Alola region, researchers studying the guardian deities have found cellular structures that, while not identical to Mew's, resonate with the same musical frequency that ancient peoples used to summon Mew at sunrise. These discoveries point toward a terrifying truth. Mew may not be alone. There might have been a whole genus of ancient, shape-shifting ancestors, each one a master key to a different branch of the Pokémon evolutionary tree. And if that is true, then the question becomes not, is Mew the ancestor, but how many ancestors are there, and where are they hiding? The scientific community in the Pokémon world is now divided. The old school insists that Mew is the sole origin point, and that all other Mew-like genes are simply echoes or convergences. The new school, armed with better sequencing technology and the courage to challenge dogma, argues that Mew is merely the most recent survivor of an ancient lineage. That the true first Pokémon, if such a thing exists, may still be sleeping beneath the crust of the planet, waiting for a trigger that the world is not ready to set off. And that brings us to the most unsettling possibility of all. That Mew is not the end of the story, but the beginning of a cycle. Consider the lore from the Sinnoh region, where the creation trio of Dialga, Palkia and Giratina were born from Arceus. But Arceus itself emerged from an egg in the void. That egg? Some ancient texts describe it as being made of a substance identical to Mew's cellular membrane. Perhaps Mew is not the ancestor of all Pokémon, but the intermediary between the primordial void and the diversity today. Perhaps every few million years, the world resets and a new Mew emerges from the ruins of the old, carrying the genetic memory of everything that came before. If that cycle is real, then the final expedition is not a journey to Guyana or Hoenn or Sinnoh. It is a journey into the deepest past and the farthest future. What would it mean to find the original Mew before the cycle began? What would look back at us from that genetic mirror? The scientists continue their work, drilling into ice cores from Mount Lanakila, scanning the depths of the great crater of Paldea, and listening to the electromagnetic whispers of the ultra wormholes. Each day brings new data, new fragments of code that hint at a larger story. And each night, Those of us who follow the lore feel the chill of a truth that is just out of reach. Because if Mew is only the beginning of a cycle, then the real origin, the true first ancestor, is still out there, waiting to be discovered. And once it is awakened, everything we thought we knew about the evolution of Pokémon will be rewritten in a single, silent, prehistoric breath. That is the expedition that never ends. That is the ghost that haunts every fossil, every egg, every new species that appears in a remote jungle. And that ghost, the one that moves between worlds and eras without ever being fully seen, is the subject of our next journey. The eternal phantom that hides in the gaps between the lights. The search for Mew's hidden origins continues long after the fossil beds of the Hoenn region have been sifted and the jungles of Guyana have yielded their final secrets. Modern scientists in the Pokémon world still chase whispers of a primordial ancestor, scanning the DNA of every newly discovered species for a trace of that same ancient signature. They dig in the ruins of lost civilizations, hoping to find a carving, a mural, a song that predates even the first human settlements. Yet for all their advanced technology and tireless effort, the truth remains as slippery as Mew itself. Because Mew was never meant to be found, at least not fully. It was designed to be a ghost, a rumor given flesh, a myth that breathes. This is the eternal phantom, and its duality is what makes it unforgettable. On one side, there is the innocent pink sprite that curls up in the palms of children, that plays hide and seek among the flowers, that giggles with the light-hearted joy of a creature that has never known malice. The Mew of the ancient songs is a protector, a guardian that appears once a year at sunrise to bless the land. In the anime, it floats through the sky like a living dream, curious and warm. But on the other side, that same creature holds the genetic code of every single Pokémon that has ever existed. It contains the blueprint of Arceus, the ferocity of Groudon, the devastation of Rayquaza. It can learn any move ever taught, from the gentlest Heal Bell to the most catastrophic Hyper Beam. It can turn invisible at will, split its body into multiple copies, and transform into any form it chooses. This is not a pet. This is a being with the potential for absolute power, restrained only by its own temperament. And that contrast, the fragility of a kitten's paw, cradling the raw energy of existence, is the heart of the mystery. Why will we never truly solve the enigma of the 151st Pokémon? Because every answer raises two more questions. If Mew is the ancestor of all, where did Mew itself come from? The games suggest it was born from the primordial soup of life itself, but that is a poetic explanation, not a scientific one. The radio drama hints at an ancient forest where humans worshipped it, but that only pushes the origin further back. And then there is the uncomfortable truth of its real-world creation. Mewtwo was designed first, and Mew was crafted afterward to fill the role of predecessor. The law was reversed, a narrative sleight of hand that turned a clone into a king. In the Pokémon world, that contradiction is smoothed over by time, but it leaves a permanent crack in the foundation. Every attempt to pin down Mew's history runs into the same wall. The creature exists as a living paradox, a being that is both the beginning and the middle, a source that is also a creation. It can never be fully catalogued because it refuses to fit neatly into any timeline, and perhaps that is the greatest gift Mew has given us. The lasting impact of a single pink sprite on the hearts of millions. It was never a grand spectacle. Its design was born from technical limitation, a solid colour to save memory, a simple tail, eyes that hold nothing but curiosity. But that simplicity became a canvas. It invited wonder. When a child first saw Mew in the pages of CoroCoro magazine back in May 1996, they were seeing something that felt real. It wasn't a legendary with an elaborate backstory or a crown of jewels. It was just there, hidden in the code, waiting to be discovered through rumor, through glitches, through the kindness of a Nintendo employee at a special event. It became the ultimate prize, not because it was the strongest, but because it was so elusive that simply possessing it felt like a secret shared between you and the developers. That feeling has never faded. Even now, with hundreds of legendary and mythical Pokémon filling the Pokédex, Mew remains the face of mystery. It is the first phantom, the one that taught a generation that some things are worth searching for, even if you never find them. So the expedition ends not with a conclusion, but with a quiet acceptance. The jungle of Guyana has grown still. The laboratory on Cinnabar Island stands abandoned. The scientists have moved on to newer fossils, newer origins. Yet somewhere, perhaps in a hidden corner of a region that hasn't been discovered yet, the pink sprite watches. It giggles, turns invisible, and vanishes into the dawn. It knows that we will never stop looking, and that is exactly what keeps it alive. Because Mew is not a puzzle to be solved. It is a feeling, the thrill of the unknown, the hope that there is always one more secret waiting just beneath the surface. And as long as that hope endures, the eternal phantom will never truly fade. It will remain floating just beyond our grasp, forever pink, forever mysterious, forever the first. What did you think of this journey? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this changed your perspective or taught you something new, consider subscribing for more mind-expanding content. And if you know someone who would find this as fascinating as you did, share it with them. These are the kind of conversations that matter.